Now these deaths will be pain-free because the machine's claws are coated with topical anesthetic. Quickly pulling off a prisoner's head is considered less cruel than lethal injection, which requires 3 separate chemicals. And Ohio isn't the only state changing the way it handles capital punishment. Last month, Texas unveiled the Machinator, which humanely squishes up to 50 prisoners at once. Coming up next, is anything valuable buried in the woods behind my house? Our team of investigators finds out.
This is the Onion News Network.
Yep, we still do email. Drop your email address in the entry box at freetalklive.com, and you'll be kept in the loop with Free Talk Live. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live on this Wednesday night edition, brought to you live from here in Keene, New Hampshire. With you in the studio tonight, it is Aria.
Beakless Mountaineer.
Oh, what? You turned down way low. Go ahead.
Beakless Mountaineer.
And Nikki.
And no matter how many times I do this, I end up feeling like unprepared as the show begins. You know, there's so much to do prior to the startup of the show, and it becomes a bit reflexive after a while. And it's just curious how you do these things automatically, and then like just a few minutes ago I was running down the quick checklist, like the show's going live, like we're going on right now, did I do everything? And it's just, I did it all reflexively without giving any thought to it whatsoever. Humans are fascinating creatures. Yes, and there's a lot of stuff like that. It fascinates me how a human being can just do stuff and have no memory whatsoever of doing it.
I think that driving, because I drive a lot for both of my jobs, and sometimes you'll just be driving home after work, and it's like, I don't even remember. It's like, I'm already in Keene.
Right?
It's like, that just doesn't seem safe that you just zone out, but I'm sure if somebody was about to crash into me, I'd move my car.
So that's the thing. Those sorts of processes are all based on, as long as you get what you're expecting, then it leaves you alone.
Yeah.
But as soon as something weird happens, it says, okay, I need all your attention right now.
Yeah.
Now, what's wacky about that, though, is you also have another process to screw that process up. So, like, you take the same route home from work every day. So it's just a script, if you will.
Yeah.
And it's just like A follows B follows C, and you don't think about it. But you also have a part of you that will make you screw up, because you will just naturally seek an amount of novelty.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, I'm just going to take this incorrect road today.
Yup. What? Might be something neat at the end of it.
So despite being a religious person by nature, despite being a spiritual person by nature, I'm not superstitious, I guess, is the way I'm looking for. And there's been a few things happening lately that sort of make me curious about that, or reevaluate that, I suppose. Like my sentencing, as we talked about last week, it was pushed back. It was finally officially pushed back a few days after Wednesday of last week. I don't remember exactly what day, but it was pushed back to March the 14th of 2023, which of course is Pi Day. 3.14.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And being as I have a tattoo of pi on the back of my head, I can't help but find some level of significance in that, right? And
well, beware the Ides of March, I guess.
There's also that reality of, curiously, the Ides of March, the March the 15th day, that stands out in my memory as the day where Shemale versus Nazi happened here on LRN.FM. So certainly a bit of significance around those days, but March the 14th, of course, is Pi Day, as we all know it, and that's going to be the day of my sentencing for whatever that's worth. And I'm always been a big advocate of Pi, but
I feel good about that.
Yeah,
that seems like a good sign to me.
That was how I felt about it.
Yeah.
And Leah, Peakless Mountaineer, is here with us, of course, tonight, and that's unusual for a Wednesday night. I actually messaged you last night for a variety of reasons, but it was largely due to anxiety, strangely enough. I've been having pretty severe anxiety issues for the last 2-ish months, maybe 3 months. And normally my solution for anxiety and depression and things like that would be to just take some shrooms. But one, I'm under, federal pre-release conditions right now, so taking shrooms is not an option. I have no desire to go to jail for violating my bail conditions by
not
taking
worth
shrooms.
it.
No. Even if it would be for medicinal purposes, which it would be, it's not worth it to me. And
You're not allowed to choose your own medicine. What do you think this is, some kind of free country?
They certainly would not like for me to. But I also tend to think that they probably have bigger fish to fry than little Arya doing shrooms for her anxiety. But it's not worth it to me to even evaluate. Plus, I know my brain physiology, my brain chemistry well enough to know that whatever's going on with me right now, it's fundamentally different from the types of anxiety that I've dealt with in the past that I took shrooms in order to deal with. What's going on right now, it's unusual. I've never experienced it before, and I don't know how to address it.
Well, do you think it's because of an outside factor rather than an inside factor, if you know what I mean? Like, I'm assuming it's because of the sentencing coming up in a few months.
Well, that certainly didn't help. I recall it escalated sort of toward the end of November, and it only got worse as Ian's trial began. And my sleep issues just escalated to the point where I was sleeping like an hour or 2, 3 hours a night. And they never really, it did go away at the end of the trial. There was like a week-long period where my sleep sort of went back to normal, but it was not very restful sleep. Like I would sleep a full 8 hours, but I would wake up not feeling rested at all.
Yeah, you weren't getting into that deep REM sleep,
right?
Probably.
So that was about when the anxiety really started. And I suspect the sentencing plays a major role in it. Right. I do have this major life-changing thing hanging over my head. It is an actual sword of Damocles I love referring to it as that. For those who are unfamiliar with the Greek mythology, he was someone who made Zeus angry, as people tended to do in Greek mythology. And the punishment for this was that he was tied to a rock under a tree with a sword hanging over him. And at any moment, the sword could fall and end his life.
Oh, I thought he was this like really arrogant king that was so sure of himself that he himself suspended a sword by just a string above his own throne.
It could have been that as well. I could be mixing up
well, also
stories.
sometimes within Greek mythology, there's two versions of story, or multiple versions of stories, rather.
True.
So
yeah, it's
different translations.
That's why it's a nightmare trying to find out, oh, well, what is the lineage? Whose father's? Oh, well, so that's listed as this here, this here, this here, and specifically doesn't have one over here.
So most recently, that would be yesterday. Actually, not most recently, because I've ended up with 3 different anxiety attacks today, which is way out of the seasonal average for me. But yesterday, I was having an anxiety attack in regard to Free Talk Live. I was like, people hate doing this show with me. I'm a terrible host, just one of those sorts of self-criticism sort of things. Whether it's based on fact or not, it's irrelevant when you're having one of these anxiety attacks. And I realized that it was nonsense, right? But rationality doesn't necessarily matter when you're having an anxiety attack, right? It doesn't matter that I know plenty of people would want to do the show with me, obviously, but it didn't matter. Yeah. But I did ultimately beat back the anxiety, and I started evaluating things from a rational standpoint. I was like, well, it's true that it has been a long time since I was on the show with a lot of people. The last time I was on the show with the captain was at Fork Fest, and the last time I was on with Peakless was also at Fork Fest, and so on. And it's good to mix these things up every once in a while. Not just for the listener, but because Peakless and I will have very different conversations than like the captain and I will have, or that Bonnie and I will have, or that Nikki and I will have. And we have a wide range of co-hosts, and mixing and matching them is a fun way of mixing things up. So I ended up texting you, and like I said, it was largely a result of all of this anxiety, because that was what made me realize that I hadn't done a show with you in forever, that I had this anxiety attack. I was like, no one wants to be on the show. This is largely because it would appear as though we have lost, to some degree, Conan, who was on the show with us on Tuesdays. And
oh, dang.
Yeah, he won't respond to me, so I don't know.
The Woods finally has him, huh?
I'm sorry?
The Woods finally has him, huh?
Well, I don't know.
He has finally left the grid entirely.
It's not that. It has something to do with the last show he was on with us was the drag queen episode, which ended up clips of it went up on TikTok, and it was a very entertaining episode. It was a lot of fun, but After that, Conan went off to do his seasonal thing where he's very busy. I mean, he works at the post office, and that was Christmas time, so he's very busy. And he was supposed to write me a character reference for the judge, right? I mean, being a former military vet, being a military veteran and a postal worker, that sort of thing. It's nice for a judge to see.
Judges love a man in uniform.
Right. So I followed up with that, and he ended up saying that, no, he won't write me a character reference, which was different from what he had said a month and a half before, where he was like, yeah, absolutely, I'll do this. I'd love to do it. Anything I can do to help. So that clued me in that something had changed between when I had asked him initially and he agreed to do it, and when I asked him, when I was like, hey, man, the deadline's here. My attorney needs these letters. Have you made any progress with it? And he was like, no, I won't write you one, or I can't provide a good character reference, or however he said it. So I checked, and sure enough, he had unfriended me on Facebook. I was like, well, this is...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is curious, right? We've been friends for a little over 4 years since I moved to New Hampshire, more or less, and there's never been any sort of bad blood or hostility or anything. So I messaged him and said, understood, but can I ask why? And presumably he hit ignore at that point, and he hasn't responded to me. I do know that he was asked recently if he was going to return to the show, or if he was, if that seasonal period of being busy had calmed down and he could return. And the response was yes, but I won't be on the show with you and Arya anymore. So I don't know what that means, and I'm not getting a response from him. But when something like that happens, it hurts to lose a friend, especially without explanation. One that I've been friends with for several years, and I can only think it's related to the drag queen episode.
That's how it would appear based on the timeline.
Yeah, but there was nothing.
If you haven't heard from him at all since that episode, that stands to reason.
Well, other than the message that I sent him saying, hey, what's up with the letter that you said you would write? It's that time. And his response was, well, I'm not writing you a good character reference. But to me, that's, man, how much did I upset you that you're not willing to tell a judge that I shouldn't go to prison, right? So I rewatched the episode, and I just didn't find anything in it that was particularly bad. There was a lot of laughter, but it wasn't laughing at him. It was laughing because of what he was saying.
And you know what? Things like that, scenes like that happen on this show all the time.
Yeah. And
it's just funny, and I don't think it should be something that's taken to heart. You know what I mean? But it's not really something that was... It's not like you guys were laughing at him or posting the video on TikTok to make fun of him. It was just, hey, we had this really good clip on the show. It was hilarious. People loved it. So we're going to promote it on our TikTok.
And it was tremendously successful.
Yeah, no, people loved it. And it caused a discussion on TikTok, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with these different social media platforms. So I don't know if that's what was taken offense to, or was it the conversation itself?
It's been a long time since I heard that episode, but I do know that in general, you do express a sort of ownership over the topic. I mean, like...
Well, I'm trans.
Oh, okay. That doesn't mean you know everything about the topic. That doesn't mean you're right about everything that's related to the topic.
Well, I haven't... No, I've admitted repeatedly that I've never even been to a drag show. But the issue...
So I have been to a drag show.
Right.
And I got to tell you, they are darn sexual. Now,
well, some of them, certainly.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, and this is part of a greater problem, I think, that, like, so as I understand it, the whole point of a drag show, and I've never seen the other side of this, but it's always been the, like, men appearing to be women, right? Mm-hmm. So the whole point of this is to overemphasize feminine characteristics, like dress not just regular female feminine, but like hyper female feminine.
It's a caricature sort
like,
of thing.
Not just a little bit of heels, but like huge heels. Not just some makeup, but like a lot of makeup.
Right.
Like, so the whole thing. Now, the greater problem here, and this is a real greater problem, especially with women being fully represented in the workforce, is that most of our looking good as a woman has been oriented around the emphasis of sexual characteristics.
Sure, But back to the issue at hand, none of that really had to do with...
Oh, no. I think that's central to this thing, is because like this overemphasis of feminine characteristics is an overemphasis on sexual characteristics. So when you have an overemphasis on sexual characteristics, that's not a place for children.
But that's not necessarily, I don't know, I think there is, a big spectrum of drag. I've seen some drag, and like you said, sometimes they overemphasize the feminine characteristics and the sexual characteristics. So they'll have big boobs and wide fake hips, but that's not always the case. I've seen some drag queens where they'll kind of have, some of that toned down a little bit. And like I said, they're fake. So you can switch the size on whatever prosthetic body parts they're using. So I have seen kind of a spectrum of it. I mean, I shared the story last week, I think it was, where when I was 5 years old or something around there, my uncle's husband does drag, and a lot of his friends do drag in New York City. So I was, like child at a family party dancing around with these drag queens. I didn't know the difference, but it didn't scar me for life. My parents didn't think it was inappropriate. Even my father, who is kind of critical of things like this, it was kind of just like, oh, whatever, they're having fun. So I don't necessarily think that it's scarring for children, and I do think there's a spectrum of drag.
Certainly,
but some of it definitely is inappropriate for children, and some of it isn't.
Obviously, I mean, some movies are inappropriate for children, but that doesn't mean that all movies are inappropriate for children. But I would certainly say that feminization and exaggerating feminine characteristics is not sexualized, right? If it's sexual, it's just because humans are innately sexual creatures. But to suggest that dressing, wearing a wig, let me finish the statement, to suggest that over embellishing one's makeup or eyeshadow or whatever is inherently sexual,
it absolutely is. Okay,
I don't think
that's misogynistic as hell.
No. Okay, so blush. Why do you think there's blush? Why does that exist?
Because blood rushes to women's cheeks.
When they are excited.
Yes.
Right. The whole
excitement comes in many forms.
Right.
Not merely sexual.
Right. But the reason that blush exists, the reason that is attractive, the reason that blush is attractive, the reason that red lips are attractive, this is all symbols of sexual excitation.
I understand that. I do understand that.
But this is the darkening around the eyes.
But if you're making that case, then you're saying that a woman walking down the street in makeup is inappropriate for children. Is that the case you're making? Because that's no more sexualized than a drag queen in and of itself. It's like makeup is sexualized. At that point, you're saying that women shouldn't be allowed around children.
That's definitely not what I'm saying. But I do think that we need to figure out a way to have a woman look nice without being sexually attractive. And I don't know how we're going to get there, because we've figured out how to make men look nice without being sexually attractive.
But does it matter?
Not at all. Not at all. I think they're one and the same.
Really?
Yeah.
So like, how does a guy in a tux, for example, like how does that attract sexually? Like what secondary sexual characteristic does that embellish? Like what about that appeals to the sex instinct?
I don't know. I'm not a biologist. I can't answer that question, but the same reason that women like a guy in a tuxedo is the same reason that men like a woman, with a nice butt.
Well, no. So, and that's one of the unfortunate, unavoidable inequities. So what a man brings to the table is his ability to, biologically speaking, his ability to protect and to provide. So run, stab something with meat, and drag it back here. And also stab the things that might eat your kids. Like that's the performance there. That's what they bring to the table. What they don't bring to the table is to be a portal for human life. We're just not able to do that.
I understand, but to get back to the subject of the drag show episode, it was mostly, especially the clip in question, it was mostly just laughter. I said almost nothing through the entire thing. I mostly just laughed. Ian was the one making comments, which was what I found the offense so curious about this, because there was nothing that was said there.
You seemed pretty innocent in the whole.
Yeah, I just sort of sat there laughing, and Ian just sort of sat there laughing. And to the extent that anyone said anything, I believe it was Ian who was actually speaking. So I was curious what I had said or done that could have offended him. And then I thought, well, maybe it's the presence of this video, right? maybe it was the fact that I took these clips instead of, just letting them die out there on the internet. But like, if that was the case, a response of, hey, take this down, I don't approve of it, would have been, okay, fine. Sorry, I didn't realize that it would upset you, right?
Yeah, that is the really sad thing to me about this, is that for whatever reason, he is obviously upset.
Right.
And instead of dealing with this directly to you and be like, hey, this bothered me, here's what I would like to change in the future for us to continue interacting with each other. Instead, he just completely withdraws. And I mean, sure, he's got the right to, but that doesn't make it less ugly.
It also could be a completely other reason that has nothing to do with the episode.
Yeah. But,
so we're making a lot of assumptions here.
We are, but I'm left
it's hard not
to do nothing but assume when
exactly.
a friend of mine for 4 years is like, no, I'm not going to make the case that you shouldn't go to prison, and no, I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. So I mean, it's like, damn. All right, well, let's back up and reevaluate the situation, and the best I have to go on is that drag episode.
Yeah.
Which, I spent... A lot of people in the TikTok comments, they did call him transphobic or hateful or whatever, and I went out of my way to respond to those people, and I posted a separate comment saying, look, guys, no, he's not transphobic at all. He's not hateful. He's not being bigoted. At worst, he's just confused on this topic. He does. Yeah, at worst, he's ignorant here.
And like these things, a lot of like drag queens and trans people, and for a lot of people, that's a completely new subject for them.
Yeah.
Like they don't get pronouns. They don't. And it's not that all of these people are being malicious when they're like, are you two people when you're a they? They just don't understand it. So
real quick, the most irritating thing for me when someone's a they is that they don't use we when they talk about themselves. Come on. Let's be consistent here. Like, I am all for you using, like, the royal we. I'm groovy with that. I believe in individual sovereignty. Great, good for you. But you can't go around saying I and then have me call you a they.
It gets confusing.
That's beyond the pale. That's past my tolerance level.
That's a fair point.
Yep.
I find them just difficult in general, right? I've learned that I can call anyone whatever pronouns they want. And no matter how masculine they are, I can call them she. No matter how feminine they are, I can call them he. It's not difficult for me to do. However, I struggle so much with calling someone they, them.
It does throw me off. I've had some they, thems at work and I misgender them all. And I feel like a jerk because I'm like, it seems, I don't care if it's genuine or not, whatever. I'm not going to be the person to purposely misgender someone, but sometimes it's hard not to because typically people present as male or female,
right?
So it's kind of, if it's a trans person that has
out,
well, exactly. And if it's a trans person that has a beard, they are clearly presenting as male. It is very easy for me to, even if their name in the computer is their dead name, that is female, it is easy for me to call this person a him. But when the they, it's just, it gets a little confusing, but whatever.
And on the other side of things, if you're a male trans to female, cut the beard. Give me some help here.
Yeah, like, help us out, man.
Maybe wear a bra if I've known you for a decade. Just saying.
I'm with you on that one, man. But then once you start talking about that, people accuse you of trying to, like, gatekeep pronouns
You're
or whatever.
transphobic.
It's like, no, I'm just trying to...
Those transphobic trannies.
I'm trying to make all of our lives easier, myself included. So what is the best cure for anxiety that's coming up? It is Free Talk Live.
Why did you move to the Shire?
I moved here to the Shire because there's other people around who take liberty just as seriously as I do.
I moved to the Shire because I saw videos of people challenging authority and thought that I could get support myself. It called to me, like, do this, right now.
I wanted to be around people like me who got it, and once I got here, I knew there was nowhere else that I wanted to be.
I've always wanted to change the world, so I moved to the Shire to join people who were actually working towards doing the same thing.
The people here are awesome, loving, and positive. It was for the adventure and for the feeling of something important is happening here, and I just wanted to come to sort of be part of that.
Visit ShireSociety.com to read and sign the Shire Society Declaration and learn the reasons why, if you love liberty, you should immigrate to the Shire. Plus, connect with others via the forum at ShireSociety.com. That's ShireSociety.com.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. At least 17 people have been killed in a series of storms that have swept through the U.S. state of California. Widespread flooding has shut down major roads and tens of thousands of people remain without power. Ira Spitzer has more from San Francisco.
California has been hit by a series of atmospheric rivers to begin the year, narrow bands of tropical moisture that form over the Pacific Ocean and have pounded the state with heavy rain as well as snowfall in the mountains. As the ground becomes more saturated with each storm, the flooding becomes an increasingly bigger problem, as well as the danger of mudslides. Gale force winds have toppled trees and power lines, cutting off electricity for hundreds of thousands of people several times in the past week. The state's emergency agency says the financial toll from the storms could exceed $1 billion. Ira Spitzer, San Francisco.
The World Health Organization says China is not providing enough data on the spread of COVID-19 to allow for adequate risk assessments. WHO officials briefed journalists on Wednesday, warning that Beijing is likely underreporting the number of deaths. Our Europe correspondent Rosie Burchard reports.
In December, World Health Organization Chief Dr. Tedros said he was very concerned about the COVID-19 situation in China. There was no such language in Wednesday's briefing. WHO officials said Beijing has stepped up data sharing and is working on plans to limit virus transmission during the upcoming Lunar New Year celebrations. But the WHO said information gaps remain. An official said they would continue to, quote, encourage access to more data from Beijing. Dr. Tedros said the roughly 11,000 COVID-19 deaths reported across the world last week almost certainly represent an underestimate.
US National Football League player Damar Hamlin has been discharged from hospital more than a week after he collapsed during a game. His doctors say they're confident he can safely continue his rehabilitation at home and with his team, the Buffalo Bills. Our US correspondent Tony Waterman has more.
Hamlin's doctor signed off on his release papers after the football player passed a series of cardiac, neurological, and vascular tests on Tuesday. Hamlin had been in the hospital for 9 days after suffering cardiac arrest during a football game, shocking players and fans across the country. It's still unclear what caused his heart to stop beating after a tackle, but the swift care he received on the field has been credited with saving his life. He had been receiving treatment in Cincinnati, where the game was played, but was transferred to a Buffalo facility on Monday. Recovery from cardiac arrest can take months, and doctors say it's too early to know if or when Hamlin may return to the game.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
Got Telegram? You can follow our channel there and discuss show prep with other listeners at telegram.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and you are invited to join us, 603-283-6160. If you'd like to do that, that's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight is Aria,
Bigless Mountaineer,
and Nikki.
And I did, of course, mention that my sentencing is coming up in just over 2 months. That's certainly a large part of the anxiety and just mental health issues in general that I've been facing. It sucks to have something like this hanging over you, and I'm not the only one with something like this hanging over me. Ian's sentencing is also coming up in a few months. I think his is April the 14th, so just a month after mine. And as I mentioned, I had asked Conan to write a letter for the judge, for me to give to the judge on my behalf, a character reference, that sort of thing. And Ian is asking you out there if he's impacted you, if he's affected your life, if he's helped you in some way. Go to letters.freetalklive.com. You'll find instructions there on what you can do, on how you can help Ian as he prepares for sentencing after being found guilty last month of 8 total counts, I think is what it was.
Yeah, I believe it was 8.
Yeah, so write a letter to Judge Joseph LaPlante about Ian's character. That's the gist of what we're trying to do. Don't take the opportunity to rail against the jury or say how dumb you think the jury was. I've heard plenty of that, and look, whether you agree or disagree with the jury, I don't think any of them were dumb. I don't think it was stupid of them.
And that's not what the letter is about,
Right. It's certainly not going to help. If you send a letter to Ian's attorney, it's like, that stupid jury should have never done this, it's going to get thrown in the trash.
Exactly.
Never presented to the judge. We want to know we want you to know how Ian helped you, not how angry you are at the jury or the federal government. Tell us what you think of Ian and how Ian helped you. That's letters.freetalklive.com. You can find instructions there on what to do and how you can help. That's letters.freetalklive.com. On the subject of anxiety, though, because all of this, it has sucked. I suspect there's some PTSD involved here, right? Because I was raided a little over, almost 2 years ago. By the time I'm sentenced, it will have been almost exactly 2 years since I was raided by the federal government. And there probably is some sort, this is probably why I can't sleep more than an hour or two without waking up. It's probably PTSD.
Well, and that's been a longer issue, right? I know you said it's been worse the past few days, but...
Well, for the last 2 or 3 months, it's been substantially worse. Since the trial got closer and my sentencing got closer and then it got pushed back again, it's like, I understand and I agreed with my attorney about pushing back the sentencing, but man...
Yep. That sword's still there.
Yeah, I really wanted to get this over with. Like, if I don't want to go to prison. I swear to God, I don't want to go to prison. But if I'm going to prison, let's get it over with. Yeah. Let's get this clock ticking, right?
Well, and that's the purpose of anxiety. Like, as much as it sucks, it does serve a purpose. It's like, hey, there are dangers in this area, so we don't want to let you, relax too much because you want to be able to punch it or run away from it when the danger rears its ugly head. So you have this unknown thing, and that's exactly what it is. It's the unknown thing. It's like something lurking in the dark. So your buddy's like, oh, a thing lurking in the dark. I know what to do with those.
Well, and that's the difference between anxiety and anxiety disorders, where the disorders is you have anxiety all the time about irrational things, but regular anxiety is that like fight or flight type of thing that's useful. So it's like, is this useful or is this not useful?
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate that their whole machinery is set up to cause as much anxiety as it can.
I can't speak as to that, but I know that there's... you're right. There's something out there in the dark, this great big question mark, right? Am I going to prison? Am I going to get probation? I suppose at this point, after 2 years of being on pre-sentence release, I don't remember the exact terminology, the possibility of time served is even existent. I suspect that won't be what happens, but 2 years of probation effectively is what I've been on at this point.
Yeah, honestly.
However, that is unlikely to count for anything, so it probably won't matter. But, nonetheless, it is a possibility. I have a life to plan, right? I have all of these things that I need to do, and Free Talk Live is a great big question mark. My other job is a great big question mark. My cats, my dogs, and none of it, I could have contingency plans, right? But there's so many unknowns in every direction that it's impossible to account for.
Well, and the Free Talk Live side of it, I think, is with Ian's trial. I think that was another big thing your body's going, okay, well, this is a really big question mark. Something big is rustling in the bushes because, if justice had actually been served and they went, well, no, he didn't do any of those things, clearly, then we would have nothing to worry about. And so now, okay, well, at least... well, I mean, we in the sense of Free Talk Live, it's like, okay, well, the continuity of our show is going to go with the same amount of unknowns as it did before the raid, which is something that we're sort of used to. Whereas, like, him being on trial for this, okay, well, now that he's been found guilty, well, at least we have this collapsed. It's not an unknown. There is definitely something here that we need to adapt to. So at least this is a bad thing, instead of it being maybe it's a bad thing, maybe not.
But to that extent, our options on how we can adapt to it are even further limited by the fact that 6 months from now, I may be in prison, in which case one of the largest factors we have that makes adapting even possible is removed from the equation. It's so stressful. And as they say, the punishment is in the process. That's certainly true. I suspect there's some actual real punishment coming, hopefully not prison, but the process itself is not good. So what can one do about anxiety? Evidently, kindness may be the best medicine for
What do you say,
curing...
kindness?
Kindness.
Oh, cool.
May be the best medicine for curing depression and anxiety. But before we get into that, let's go to the phone, 603-283-6160. If you want to join us, because we do have Bad Slave on the line from here in New Hampshire. Bad Slave, you're on Free Talk Live.
Well, thanks for taking my call, are you?
Yeah, what's on your mind tonight?
And I have to ask
Yeah?
I kind of fail to understand. I know that the federal courts are special places, meaning, intensely corrupt.
That's
why does anyone take a plea without the details known of the consequences?
Well, that's a fair question. To the extent that anything could be known, I was offered a deal back in April of this year where the prosecutors would argue for 12 months in prison, and my attorney could probably get that argued down to 12 months of probation or whatever, and that they could hash that out. But they were always going to argue for me to be sent to prison. That was never taken off the table in the way that it was with Andy and Renee or nobody. For whatever reason, they want me to go to prison. So sometimes you just don't...
Why? Because you're odd?
I don't know why. You'd have to ask the prosecutors.
Well, they want Ian to go to prison too, so...
Yeah.
Didn't ask them?
No, I have tried to minimize my contact with the prosecutors.
I have a quick suspicion. Because you're in first chair.
It could very well be that.
No, I mean, I've considered this from the get-go to be primarily an attack on Free Talk Live, and secondarily all of these other things, including an attack on Bitcoin.
Well, when the raid first happened, I remember it was kind of like, okay, so we have two people that know how to do everything.
Right.
And it appears to be Arya and Ian.
Mm-hmm.
Regrettably, that is the case, and that's why there are so many questions about Free Talk Live that just can't be resolved yet. And I was hoping to have those answered, in 15 more days, with the original sentencing being on January 26th, but it got pushed back. So to answer your question about Slave, there was never any the prosecutors, the federal court system, the American government, they don't like clear, unambiguous answers. They like shady, unclear answers in it whenever they can get them. So
they have altered the deal. Pray they do not alter it further.
Well, they told me they were going to, if I didn't take the plea deal back in April, they were going to bring further charges against me, and they were going to take the deal off the table. And I was like, okay, fine, well, bring your charges, because I'm not taking this deal. And they did exactly what they said they would do. They brought more charges against me, and we sort of proceeded with that for the next few months. When it came time, it was clear to me that I was going to get, and I didn't know whether or not Ian would get convicted or not, but it was clear to me that I would almost certainly get convicted for operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. If nothing else, it seemed to me, after talking with my attorney and talking with not talking with the prosecutor, but after talking with my attorney and having these hearings in the court, it was clear to me that I was going to get found guilty. So it didn't make any sense to go to trial on that particular issue. It would get the other charges dropped, and it would reduce the sentencing to the lowest amount possible. But whether that was going to be prison or probation, that's only up to the judge to decide, and no one else. So I mean, we can't ask the judge what he's going to prescribe as the punishment.
But I mean, as far as why anyone would take this deal, it's you have kidnappers, okay? So your kidnappers are telling you they want you to do a thing. Now, you don't know for sure that they will treat you better if you do that thing that they tell you they want you to do, but it's a pretty good bet they'll treat you less bad than if you don't.
It's a good way to put it.
Was that it?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I mean, I've been in the position of having to take a 2.5 year cage time and a felony for a political crime of exercising my right to travel.
Well, I certainly did not want to take a plea deal. I wasn't inclined to take a plea deal. I mean, there's a reason I rejected the one back in April. It's like, no, I'm taking this to trial, and I'm not going to be persuaded to plead guilty to something that I'm not guilty of. However, as everything began to shake out, it became very, very clear that whether I felt I was breaking the law at the time I committed those actions or not was completely irrelevant. The prosecutors were defining money transmission as X, and the judge had agreed that money transmission was X. Congress had said that money transmission was X, and my argument was basically, okay, sure, but the Constitution or federal or jury nullification. Those were the only two arguments I had in my favor. Was, okay, well, it's unconstitutional because the Constitution never gave FinCEN or the U.S. Treasury the right to do this in the first place, which it's a solid argument, but it was stricken down at the hearing to dismiss counts 1, 2, and 3 in, I think that was in September, maybe it was October, I don't remember the exact timeline now. But that was the constitutional argument we attempted to make, that it's unconstitutional.
Can they even see constitutional arguments in that court?
Yes.
Wow. Because that's usually what every single time that I have ever seen anyone, even in federal court, bring up the Constitution, they're like, oh, well, we can't see that here. Like, nope, that's a matter for the Supreme Court. We don't deal with like your especially constitutional amendments and such.
That's what I assumed.
Well, we very much did. The argument was that the old Supreme Court, or prior to this most recent iteration of the Supreme Court, they relied on what was called the Chevron deference, which is this idea that if the Constitution did not explicitly forbid a government organization from doing something, then they were allowed to do it. Whereas the alternative to that, which this latest Supreme Court is doing, is called the major cases doctrine, or the major questions doctrine, which is sort of the opposite, that if the Constitution hasn't explicitly authorized them to do something, then they're not allowed to. So it's either if we have not told you that you can't do it, then you can do it. That was the old way. And the new way is, if we haven't told you that you can do it, then you cannot do it.
Oh, the way it was actually written into the 10th Amendment.
And we saw this recently with one of these major cases that came up. It was the EPA versus someone, and there was another example, and my attorney brought both of these. He was like, hey, look, the Supreme Court just decided that these things were unconstitutional because it's too broad of an area for it to be regulated like this. It's clearly unconstitutional. And the judge disagreed. He said, well, I think you're applying this, he said to my attorney, in a way that is novel and that it's not meant to be applied. So I'm not going to accept this argument. I'm going to allow these charges to proceed. I'm not going to dismiss them. And with all of those things considered, I took a plea deal. And, I've had to live with that since.
Yeah, I mean, the simple fact of the matter is that unlike actual contracts with human beings, they don't have to tell you what all the terms are. They just have to tell you, well, the terms will be within this range if you take this deal.
It seemed to me pretty obvious that the law in question, which authorized money transmitting businesses, it created that legal framework. It seemed to me very clear that it did not apply to cryptocurrency. And this was because in January of 2021, the law was amended in a way that clearly included cryptocurrency. So prior to January of 2021, ipso facto, it did not include cryptocurrency. If it did, then it would not have been necessary for Congress to add cryptocurrency to it in January of 2021. This is all logical, right?
Yep.
Logic doesn't necessarily matter in the court system when it comes to the Constitution and legality and frameworks and all of this other stuff. And I thought at one point that my attorney was making bad arguments. I was like, oh, he's lost it and he's slipping. He's making a bad case. And then I realized, I had a moment of lucidity where I realized that, no, my attorney was making great arguments, but they were on an entirely different level where I couldn't even comprehend the arguments they were having. It was just so far beyond me. And I was like, okay, I'm out. I can't follow this argument at this point. And then my attorney and I discussed, he was like, okay, well, they're going to convict you on operating an unlicensed money transmitting business unless you get a Hail Mary and the jury decides, jury nullification happens, which
is very unlikely.
Right. I mean, it's not worth counting on at this point. So, I mean, my options were to plead guilty or to get found guilty in a federal courtroom, in which case, as we saw with Ian, they probably... I mean, the money laundering charges and the wire fraud charges, they clearly would have been dismissed prior to me going to court. But then I would have still gotten hit with the conspiracy charge. So I would have come off worse if I had gone to trial, definitively, by this point.
From where I stand, so there's an old saying that you can get a jury to indict a ham sandwich.
Yes.
Because they used to, and every now and again they'll actually do this process for like a murder trial, but there used to be a thing where you actually had to get human beings to say, yeah, that's an actual crime, we should have a court for that. And it became so easy that the phrase was you can get the jury to indict a ham sandwich. And from where I stand, it's very clear that you can also get a jury to convict a ham sandwich at this point.
It was actually a judge who made the statement that you can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich.
Oh, I didn't know that part of it.
I think it was a federal judge in the state of New York, actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's true, and that's the way the game is played, right? A grand jury is just a group of, I don't know, some number of people who they know if they vote to indict, they're not sending anyone to prison. It's no harm off their back. It's no consequence to them. It's not immoral for them.
Except it is.
Well, yes,
yeah,
but
except it completely degrades our civilization, but they don't care about that.
No, they don't view it that way.
They want to go home.
Yeah, they want to go home, and the prosecutors are probably telling them, look, we're not asking you if this person's guilty. We're saying, here's the evidence that Aria is operating an unlicensed money transmitting business. Should we indict Aria and take Aria to trial for operating an unlicensed money transmitting business? And their argument is, well, if Aria is not guilty, then that jury will find her not guilty. So what does it matter? Yeah, let her have a trial.
And also, I just want to say something about juries really quick. I feel like when the jury was invented previously, communities were smaller, right?
Yeah.
So those were your peers.
Right.
Those were people
they actually knew you, knew people who knew you.
Exactly. Yeah. So we don't need all these character references and stuff. You're just known throughout the community. It's not just now our population has grown so big that these are complete strangers. You know, they've never heard of you before, and if they have, it was rumors or whatever it is. I know they're not supposed to research people and things about the case while they're on the jury, but we don't know what they're doing. Their computers aren't being tracked.
Yeah,
they can do whatever they want.
It's totally upside down. It's
you know?
Completely backwards from where it used to be, where now, if they find out that you know the person, well, that makes them ineligible for jury selection.
Exactly. So how are these peers? And I think that's why it's so easy for them to just be like, yep, guilty. Because it just seems for some reason it's easier to get all of them to agree if they all have to agree. It's easier for all of them to just be like, yep, guilty, than innocent. I don't...
And like you were just pointing out, when they're voting on whether or not to indict you, they're like, oh, well, I have a clear conscience because I'm just saying we should have a trial to find out. So, I mean, you're thinking reasonably enough, well... You wouldn't have me in here to ask if we should have a trial if there wasn't a question. Yeah. So let's answer the question. But the thing is, when you get to the trial, all of those people have somewhere in their minds, well, if they didn't do it, why are they on trial?
Yeah.
The bigger problem is that it often doesn't go to trial because it is nothing for the grand jury to offer up the indictment. So then the prosecutor, they bring those charges against you. They say, okay, you've been charged with operating an unlicensed money transmitting business and here's 9 other things that you've been charged with. If you plead guilty to this charge and this charge, we'll drop these other charges and we won't bring additional charges against you. Because you know at that point that they can go to that grand jury and they say, you know what, we also think Aria was money laundering and evading taxes and insert whatever financial crimes you can come up with or structuring. We think Aria was doing all of these things and we want to indict her for these as well. So then they have that to threaten you with, where they say, accept this plea deal. We'll drop all of these charges, and you know we can bring these additional charges against you. We can bring 15, 20,000, we can bring 1,000 more charges against you if we want.
Right.
And we'll do that unless you accept this plea deal, at which point you don't get a trial anymore because you've accepted the plea deal. And that's the way the American justice system is played. That's why something like they like touting the number that 98% is the federal conviction rate. It's actually like 99.6% or something like that. It's insanely successful, but it includes plea deals. It includes all of those people who accepted plea deals because they didn't want to get charged with additional stuff.
And that's the majority of people.
And there's no justice in this, people. Look, if someone is guilty of these crimes, do you really want a justice system that is going to cut them a deal, that is going to cut them a break? In addition,
and most people that accept plea deals aren't actually guilty. They're just trying to avoid whatever worse punishment.
Yeah.
You know,
we can speculate that's true.
I mean, from what I've
pretty
seen,
obvious.
it is.
Like, if someone comes to you and says, hey, you can either pee in this cup and give me $500, or you can spend 5 years in jail. I mean, 50-50 on the 5 years in jail. Like, maybe you'll get convicted, maybe you won't. But who wants to go to a roll of the dice of spending time in jail when they could just pee in a cup and give you $500? I mean, they didn't do it, but why would they risk it?
Well, the average American, as I understand it, commits 3 felonies a day.
Mm-hmm.
So anyone out there listening could be indicted for any one of those felonies. And then the prosecutors say, okay, we'll plead guilty to felony 1 and we'll drop felonies 2 and 3, but don't plead guilty and we'll bring 10 different charges against you.
Right.
And maybe they're guilty, maybe they're not. It's sort of irrelevant at that point. But if they are guilty, what sort of justice system is it for the system to be cutting them deals? Or if they're guilty of murdering 15 other people, what level of justice is it for them to be like, okay, well, if you plead guilty to murders 2 and 3, we'll drop all of this. What about those 15 other people who were murdered? There's no justice for them in this. The entire system is not built on justice. It's so hopelessly corrupt and counter to anything that was supposed to be good that I don't know what else to say about it except, man.
And even if you get completely off scot-free, they find by a jury of your peers you didn't do what you're accused of. Okay, they've drained how much of your life, how much of your anxiety, how much of your money. They've ruined you this much, and you will never get any of that back.
But despite all of that, there is actual justice to be found in the system. Believe it or not. There's more coming up here. It is Free Talk Live.
So the protection of life, liberty, and property is what the Free State Project is all about. But it's an effort to move 20,000 people who understand.
It's about demonstrating to the entire country
that, yeah, we can have a free market, a truly free market.
Making it just a freer, great place to live.
It's the world's largest voluntarist libertarian community, and it's only getting bigger.
That's amazing, to be able to move to a place where other people passionately believe in being free and independent.
What the Free State Project is managing to do, though, is to put their money where their mouth is. Physically getting up across the country and saying, let's go someplace and let's demonstrate the power of these ideas. There's a lot of kind of philosophy that surrounds liberty. There's a lot of thinking about it and talking about it. But here in New Hampshire, people are doing it.
101 Reasons Liberty Lives in New Hampshire, a documentary by Free State Project Early Movers. Watch it free at 101reasonsfilm.com. 101reasonsfilm.com.
I'm crazy about My Magic Mud. This is the most important oral care product created this millennium, and I'm not kidding. We all have different opinions on politics and issues, but we all have mouths. And I want yours to be as clean as possible, with teeth as bright as they were meant to be. I will never be without My Magic Mud. It's a little surprising, but man, does it work. If you only listen to one thing I say ever, go to mymagicmud.com and get 20% off with code FTL. mymagicmud.com, code FTL.
Tired of cancel culture? Sick of mega tech corporations holding an axe over your head? Join the LRN.FM Matrix chat server. It's self-hosted, so no one else can tell us what to do or say. Don't like the existing channels? You can make your own. You can even connect into some of our channels from other Matrix servers. It's federated. For the full LRN.FM Matrix experience, though, you should join our server via the step-by-step instructions at chat.lrn.fm. chat.lrn.fm.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 2 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in Washington, I'm Kate Fisher. At least 17 people have been killed in a series of storms that have swept through the U.S. state of California. Widespread flooding has shut down major roads and tens of thousands of people remain without power. Ira Spitzer has more from San Francisco.
California has been hit by a series of atmospheric rivers to begin the year, narrow bands of tropical moisture that form over the Pacific Ocean and have pounded the state with heavy rain as well as snowfall in the mountains. As the ground becomes more saturated with each storm, the flooding becomes an increasingly bigger problem, as well as the danger of mudslides. Gale force winds have toppled trees and power lines, cutting off electricity for hundreds of thousands of people several times in the past week. The state's emergency agency says the financial toll from the storms could exceed $1 billion. Ira Spitzer, San Francisco.
The World Health Organization says China is not providing enough data on the spread of COVID-19 to allow for adequate risk assessments. WHO officials briefed journalists on Wednesday, warning that Beijing is likely underreporting the number of deaths. Our Europe correspondent Rosie Burchard reports.
In December, World Health Organization chief Dr. Tedros said he was very concerned about the COVID-19 situation in China. There was no such language in Wednesday's briefing. WHO officials said Beijing has stepped up data sharing and is working on plans to limit virus transmission during the upcoming Lunar New Year celebrations. But the WHO said information gaps remain. An official said they would continue to, quote, encourage access to more data from Beijing. Dr. Tedros said the roughly 11,000 COVID-19 deaths reported across the world last week almost certainly represent an underestimate.
US National Football League player Damar Hamlin has been discharged from hospital more than a week after he collapsed during a game. His doctors say they're confident he can safely continue his rehabilitation at home and with his team, the Buffalo Bills. Our US correspondent Tony Waterman has more.
Hamlin's doctor signed off on his release papers after the football player passed a series of cardiac, neurological, and vascular tests on Tuesday. Hamlin had been in the hospital for 9 days after suffering cardiac arrest during a football game, shocking players and fans across the country. It's still unclear what caused his heart to stop beating after a tackle, but the swift care he received on the field has been credited with saving his life. He had been receiving treatment in Cincinnati, where the game was played, but was transferred to a Buffalo facility on Monday. Recovery from cardiac arrest can take months, and doctors say it's too early to know if or when Hamlin may return to the game.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the uncompromising words of one of the world's leading humanitarian aid chiefs about the repression of women in Afghanistan. Jan Egeland is a former Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. Today, he runs the Norwegian Refugee Council. It has been one of the principal sources of humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan, but has now shut its operations down after the Taliban said its female staff, along with those employed by other NGOs, were no longer permitted to work. So Mr. Egeland is in Kabul trying to get the Taliban to change their minds.
Without our female colleagues, we cannot work. We will not work. We are not able to provide for the women of Afghanistan, but we would also not be a principled employer if we agreed to this. We are not giving aid to the hundreds of thousands of people we serve here in Afghanistan. And it's raining, it's snowing, it's miserable. And not to give them aid is so painful for us.
He's had a series of talks with Taliban officials since he arrived on Sunday and has secured support for his campaign from several foreign embassies in the Afghan capital. But there is no sign yet that the Taliban are ready to capitulate, putting more than 2 million Afghans who have relied on aid from Mr. Egeland's organisation at risk. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
Our main news again. At least 17 people have been killed in a series of storms that have swept through California. The World Health Organization says China is not providing enough data on the spread of COVID-19 to allow for adequate risk assessments. And US National Football League player Damar Hamlin has been discharged from hospital more than a week after he collapsed during a game. And that's the latest feature story news. Kate Fisher reporting.
This is the Onion Week in Review. Gushing women voters announced Monday that they just can't help but feel an uncontrollable attraction to the sexist Republican Party. Saying they should know better but just can't resist the GOP's reckless neglect of women's health issues, smitten females across the country are reportedly driven wild by the GOP's blatant chauvinism.
I can't say no to bold, misogynistic politicians who think their authority extends to my uterus. Whenever you vote for a Republican, you feel like you're doing something a little bit naughty.
Top officials within the U.S. military acknowledged Wednesday that they were desperate to be given just one solid war they could really knock out of the park. Citing the recent string of messy, ambiguous military engagements in the Middle East, members of the Pentagon brass called for a conflict against a sovereign nation with a standing army and a clear-cut bad guy who employs conventional tactics and weaponry.
No roadside bombs, no plainclothes militants hiding out among innocent civilians. Just a fair fight where two sides shoot at each other and someone wins. We're absolutely great at that.
This is the Onion News Network.
Our Matrix server is about as free as internet chat can be. Join the existing rooms or create your own at chat.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live, and you are invited to join us. 603-283-6160. You can weigh in on whatever we've been discussing. You can talk about anxiety. Again, that's 603-283-6160. With you tonight, it's Aria.
Beakless Mountaineer.
And Nikki.
And if you really want to, you can join in on the conversation we were having during the break there about whether what Nikki is eating is
cereal-free cereal,
is
as
a
I think
soup
it is.
or a cereal.
So let me describe it real quick. It is cut up bananas with blueberries, walnuts on top, with milk in it. Is it cereal? Is it soup? Is it something completely different?
See, my initial assessment was that it was cereal, but there's no grain. Walnuts are really close to, I mean, they look like a grain, but it's not a grain, right?
Well, you see the milk and you're like, yeah, that's cereal. And that's what I always call it. I call it my banana cereal because it's like keto cereal, you know? Except none of that's keto, so never mind. But it's like it's like carb-free
soup,
cereal.
But there's no soup in it.
Yeah, exactly.
I told you I'm willing to accept cereal-free cereal.
I really enjoy contradictions, so.
It's halfway to a parfait is what it is.
So then we thought about, well, maybe it's a soup, right?
And then we found a definition that I cannot even remotely agree with.
Well, because it according to you, it excluded tomato soup. And
right.
I don't remember the definition off the top of my head. So it was a long, sort of laborious definition anyway. But so what would that concoction be described as? Soup or cereal, or what would you call it? I'm still inclined to call it a cereal. I don't know that
that's
grains
what I call it,
is necessary.
Well, no, grains are cereals. Like that's another word for the same thing. And if you don't have a cereal in it, then it's not a cereal.
Maybe I should just make up a new word for it.
So
there you go.
Well,
or if someone wants to call in, be the first person to apply a new name to this food.
That's 603-283-6160. So it's either a cereal or a soup. And cereal fits to me better than soup does. But if we're sticking with that definition, which seems reasonable because there's no grains in it, then it has to be a soup. Even though it has no vegetables or meats in it, it seems like that's. So what is it? I don't know. But let's go to the phones. We have Shag on the line from, I did not actually get the location. Shag, you're on Free Talk Live. I think you said Maryland?
No, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, that's it. Yep. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind tonight?
I just wanted to comment on and talk to you a little bit about anxiety, PTSD. And this is probably stuff that you might be well aware of, but, you know, trauma is a normal part of the human experience. We all receive, trauma at one point or another in life, and it affects the central nervous system, and that has to do with, as Peakless was saying, the fight or flight response. So when you're perceiving a threat, when you have a perception of a threat, cortisol and adrenaline spike. And when that threat is kind of always hanging there, that can put your central nervous system in a state where it's kind of always on that alert fight or flight mode. Cortisol levels are high, adrenaline's high. And I just wanted to also talk about anxiety and sleep issues.
Well, you said that. Before we get too further into that, I mean, let's have a dialogue. You mentioned that everyone, I think you said everyone has some sort of PTSD, and I would both agree.
No, you said everyone experiences trauma.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I would agree and disagree in general. Maybe everyone experiences trauma. I'm not entirely sure, but I would actually make the argument that every person does have PTSD, and that existence itself is a cause of PTSD, and we're just so numb to it, we're so accustomed to it that we don't actually think about it. I think it's my hypothesis that the very act of existing, of being thrust into this universe,
being born,
with no signpost, no guide, no explanation, just bam, here you are, you exist, there's no explanation, good luck figuring it out, you stupid monkey, is a traumatic experience.
Well, that's why no one remembers it, man. Suppressed memories from birth trauma.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't even matter if you remember it, because a lot of the things that happen to us as infants carry on and affect us emotionally and psychologically. We don't even remember that stuff, but that is literally the point of the birth process, is for it to be traumatic, to give people like the initial fighting instincts of life and survival.
But we're so young then that we, like, one of my favorite scenes, one of the most analogous scenes in movies that I can think of that is similar to this, is the scene in The Matrix where Neo wakes up and he immediately starts pulling stuff out. He lashes out. That's what I think a person would do if they were just born suddenly at the age of 25 years old. They just woke up and suddenly they existed. They had no existence prior to that, just suddenly. But we're infants when we first begin existing, so we can't lash out. We can't rip all the cables out. We can't do anything except continue to exist.
Well, they kind of do, actually.
What do you mean?
They kind of do cry and flail a lot, so maybe they are.
But we just as much as they can.
Yeah, as much as they can, but we just can't.
It's just that Neo had all of this like prior training of living in a body like this, and kids don't. Like baby comes in and like they have no idea how to work anything except like their tongue, their eyes, and their lungs. And that's about it.
So I think I think existence itself is traumatic, and the whole of human history, or the whole of a person's life, is trying to come to terms with that trauma and try to make sense of it. And this is why governments and religions are so popular. They come along and they say, look, it's not pointless. It's not unknown. It's not a mystery. We have all of the answers. This is the point of existence. This is the reason you live, is to have this white picket fence and 2.5 kids and a 850 credit score, and to
sounds terrible,
and to vote and to love your government. That's the point of your existence, and worship God, and then you'll go.
Naturally, the reason you exist is to serve me.
Right.
Obviously.
And then you'll have heaven. You'll live in Sugar Candy Mountain for all eternity, and that's the point of all of this existence, right? And that's my hypothesis of existence in general. It's just that it's traumatic. And we are struggling desperately to come to terms with the trauma of existing.
Yeah, right. And when we're, extremely young, we're essentially scared of most things. And it's kind of the role, historically, it's the role of our tribe. In the modern world, tribes are kind of different, but it's the role of the tribe to essentially teach you and nurture you into a place where you are able to perceive what is a threat and what's not a threat, and you're able to distinguish between those things.
Well, that's one of the things about like post-traumatic stress disorder versus. So yes, we all have traumas. Now, what's the difference there is that with a stress disorder, you haven't integrated the trauma into your life, because there are traumatizing things. But if you respond to them appropriately, then you can take that experience and work it into like your worldview and who you are and how you deal with reality.
That's very true. That's one of the reasons I'm against domestic violence to the extent that I am. I grew up watching my mother get the hell beaten out of her by alcoholics, and that was a traumatizing experience. And obviously that affected me profoundly. But because of that, I'm not a domestic violence. I'm not an advocate of, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not an activist who's trying to do anything in particular for domestic violence. I speak out against it whenever the opportunity presents itself, but I'm not out there like picketing to end domestic violence or anything like that. However, I'm very much against domestic violence. Like, I don't even argue with people when I'm in relationships with that. We can have discussions, certainly. But as soon as one of us starts yelling or becoming hostile, I leave the situation. I'll come back when one of us has calmed down, because to me, that's not productive, and it's not coming from a place that can go anywhere good. To me, yelling at one another, it's just a lighter form of hitting one another, and I don't want to participate in it. And this would drive my ex-wife insane. Because no matter how angry she would get and she would yell at me, I would just turn around and walk away. And let me tell you, that doesn't make women calmer.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't make anyone calmer. It just makes them angrier. But eventually, they do calm down, and you can have a discussion at that point. Now, I wasn't always like this. You know, there was a time when I would certainly yell back or whatever, but people grow, and I think these are good things. So this is one of the things I said recently in part of the sentencing. I'm having to go through a psychiatric evaluation with a psychiatrist, and I argued that I don't necessarily, a lot of people like painting things in the terms of, well, I'm an abuse survivor or whatever, trying to put a positive spin on a negative action. And I understand the value in doing that, like saying that you're an abuse survivor is taking ownership of that and turning something positive out of a negative experience. But there are no good experiences and no bad experiences. Only this is an experience that happened and it shaped me, and it's cause and effect. There's no moral assessment to it whatsoever.
If I cut off your toes, that's a bad experience. I'm sorry, you're not going to enjoy the experience, and when we're done with it, you're not going to be more capable. You'll just be a person with no toes.
It's not impossible that something positive comes out of it, though.
Good things can come out of bad experiences. That's definitely true, but that doesn't change the fact that they're bad experiences.
I think that's just a value assessment to it that's largely arbitrary.
Well, and humans are the ones that are making the assessment. The thing that happens isn't inherently one way or the other way. Like, you don't know. You're making an assumption. She might like it if you cut off her toes.
That's true.
You know, like, you don't know.
I am assuming that you would evaluate that experience similarly to me. Now, I'll grant you, nothing is inherently positive or negative. Because value isn't inherent to anything.
Right, it's subjective.
All value is subjective and personal. But I assume that your nervous system is sufficiently similar to mine that you would find it an unpleasant experience for me to remove your toes.
Right.
And I do know
that's a
that,
fair
practically
assumption.
speaking, that would keep you from walking well, which I also assume that you appreciate being able to do.
And these are all valid assumptions, right? It could back to this is basically the foundation of morality. It is a series of assumptions that I assume you would prefer happiness over pain, right? And sure, that's an assumption, but it's a valid assumption that is true in almost all cases.
Well, the whole treat others the way you want to be treated thing that we learn in preschool, not everybody wants to be treated like I want to be treated.
That's
but
true.
It's...
Especially if you get into the minutia.
Yeah, but it's just a safer assumption. You know, it's like a nice golden rule when you're in preschool.
Right. Yeah, and in general, you can assume that someone doesn't want to get run over by a car.
Yeah.
Right? It may not be necessarily true. Maybe there is someone out there that wants to die, and we have a story about that coming up, because I think it's valid. If someone wants to die, they should be treated seriously. They should not be taken as, oh, you're mentally ill, and how dare you even contemplate such a thing? No, life is worth living. Well, this is that person's call to make, and no one else's.
Yeah.
And more assumptions, you know?
But, I mean... It amazes me that in thousands of years of human development, humans haven't become any more accepting of suicide and the desire to not be alive anymore than they were back when Plato mentioned how sad it is that someone would be suicidal.
Well, and I think part of this is, so from those who do not have a libertarian mindset, it's very easy to believe that, because their whole perspective is that you don't belong to you. You belong to society. So you can't do this and you have to do that because society needs you to do that and doesn't want you to do this. Whereas from a libertarian or voluntarist perspective, it seems pretty obvious that at least you have the right to, even if it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, it seems obvious to me that if my life is mine, and I think even the most diehard statist would readily admit that my life belongs to me and no one else, and they would argue that, I owe some allegiance to society or something like that. But I think even the most diehard statist would be like, yes, your life is yours.
I suspect you overestimate them.
I hope not. But they don't extend that to the obvious reality that if my life is mine, then I can end it. Like my car. My car is definitively mine. No one would dispute my right to take a sledgehammer to it and, bash out all the windows.
I'm sure somebody could dispute that.
But it's my car.
They don't care. You're causing a ruckus or something.
That's
different. They can
right?
come up with any reason.
Peace.
They have.
But all of that's different.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Assuming I'm not disturbing the peace, I'm just doing it on my property, and it's not disturbing the neighbors or anything like that. That no one has any claim to say no. You can't smash out the windows in your car.
Yeah.
Well, so for example, the COVID thing, a big part of that was the belief that you owe me having taken this vaccine. Like, this vaccine prevents the transmission of this disease. And regardless of whether or not that's a fact, even if that were the case, they believe that you owe it to them to put this in your body because it will keep you from transmitting a disease. So
Jack,
they don't
with
believe that you own your own body.
Yeah, what else did you have to weigh in on? Sorry, we sort of got derailed there.
Okay. No, I was listening. Yeah, anyway, I could go on and on about PTSD, but essentially it's your nervous system getting locked into that fight or flight mode, and so it's important to investigate and explore on a very deep level what you are perceiving to be a danger. And there's dangers that are legitimate, and then there's dangers that are just totally not real. So you definitely have to, one definitely needs to explore that.
Well, I think in my case it's pretty obvious, and I think this is why, and I think it's pretty clear that it's PTSD as a result of the raid, and this is why I can't sleep more than an hour or two, past.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to say, sorry to cut you off, a real helpful thing to do, if you can, is to find access to a sauna. Sauna, and try to use it on every day, every other day. Take very intense saunas. It boosts your endorphin levels like crazy. It's like kind of like an opiate. It lowers cortisol. It'll absolutely help you sleep. I call it the health elixir because it essentially is all healing in a lot of ways.
Maybe, and I mean, that's great, right? All of that's great. It would be great for me to not have PTSD for having it raided, but that's not going to do any damn good to stop these people from doing it to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's far more of a concern to me than is whatever they may have done to me. It's the fact that they will do this to other people. Not other people will be as well equipped to deal with it as the evaluating therapist said. You're surprisingly resilient. Well, yeah, I've sort of had to be resilient, and that's sort of how resiliency works. But they're going to continue traumatizing people as long as the FBI continues to exist without justice. They did this over completely white-collar crimes, operating an unlicensed business, not having a business license. They saw fit to traumatize not just me, but several other people, breaking into our homes, violating the sanctity of our homes. And I don't know if anyone out there has ever really thought about it, but your home, your castle, that if you don't feel safe there, then there's nowhere on this planet that you can feel safe.
Yeah, been
and
there.
what the FBI did on March the 16th of 2021 was guarantee that I cannot feel safe in my own house. And there's nothing more damaging to a person's sense of safety than that.
Yeah. And I hate to say it, but it is within your control to go to a sauna or to one of my favorites is to take a good long deep soak. There's lots of good data on that being a really effective way of lowering cortisol and all that sort of stuff.
Hot yoga.
Right.
Just gonna throw that out there.
But I
Turd
don't
Ferguson isn't going to be able to take that, Nikki. you sweating and doing yoga in a sauna. The poor guy is going to have a heart attack.
But I don't see how it is in any way in our power to even get the FBI to try calling first. Just be like, hey, I'd hate to have to, beat down your door.
Or like just knock on the door and somebody would have opened
could you
it.
Just, turn yourself in? I mean,
You're
even
not
after
wrong.
you have the
Just
place
knock
surrounded,
on
just
the
be
door.
like, hey, how's it going? We've got you surrounded. We didn't want to make a big thing out of it and freak you out. So could you just...
But they did want to make a big thing out of it.
Yeah.
They were super excited to bust down doors and point guns at people and do all sorts of horrible... Yeah, exactly.
Evildoers being defined as anyone who resists government.
And someone who doesn't have a business license. But you're absolutely right. There's a cultural problem here because they could have easily... I mean, Ian had an attorney of record already prior to the raid, and the FBI had been notified that Ian had retained Mark Sisti, and I think I saw the letter at one point. It said something to the effect of, so if you need to interact with my client for any reason, please contact my office so that can be arranged, right? Which is all they had to do was contact Mark Sisti and say, hey, look, we have a warrant here for Ian's arrest.
They needed to come here and steal things.
Well, they still could have done that. They still could have done all of this without the traumatizing aspects of it.
Yeah.
They could have knocked him. I didn't have an attorney on record, but they could have easily waited until a reasonable hour, not 6 o'clock in the morning, knowing, because they knew everything about me. They knew I worked night shift. They knew I had been in bed maybe 2 hours at the most at that point. All they had to do was wait until 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning.
Well, that wouldn't get them off.
No, this is the cultural issue that we have.
And that's a real part of this that I wonder exactly what the ratio is. Like, how much of this came down to the fact that it just makes them, it just gives them such joy to harm people, to scare them, to put them under their boot.
I mean, that's what it feels like. Why else would you smash out all the windows and show up with military vehicles and bulldoze down doors and point guns at people and make people walk through glass? It's because they enjoy it. You wouldn't do that. You don't do things that typically you don't do things that you don't like. It's like, and cops will give you that BS like, I hate to have to do this, but I'm just doing my job. Like, I really hate. No, you love doing this. That's why it's your job. I go to work every night because I love it. And, I like taking care of people and they like hurting people. And that's just what it is.
Sadly, yes. And it just cannot be stressed enough that all of this could have been accomplished in a non-violent way.
Absolutely.
In every direction, all they ever had to do was show up with a search warrant, which they had.
Yeah.
Knock politely on the door and say, hey, look, we're here to arrest you. We're going to search your property. There's nothing you can do about it. You can answer our questions. You can invoke your right to have an attorney present. You can do all of these things, but this is what's going to happen. Instead...
I was just going to say all of these people, you, Ian, whoever, are on record being peaceful, non-violent people. On record.
Right, which is more than we could say about the people who bashed in my door, threatened to shoot me.
So just to say that it's unnecessary to do all of that, and they've came here before, knocked on the door with a search warrant, whatever, and the door was opened and, no one tried to attack them or ambush them. This could have been done peacefully.
Yeah, and even the halfway measure where okay, well, we're still going to be horrible, violent villains here, but we'll give you a call out first so you have a chance to not have your property destroyed and guns pointed at you yet. Even that, they can't even be bothered to do what their own things are telling them to do.
Well, they claim they did a call out. I don't know if they claim they did one at my place, but I think they claim they did one here, which is basically just saying, open up, and then they undertake their actions.
At 5 a.m. when everyone's sleeping?
But based on the videos, there was no realistic call out. There was no attempt to wake anyone up or handle this in a peaceful, sane, civilized way. It was just brutality from beginning to end. 603,
which is why it's probably all sadism.
603-283-6160. It is Free Talk Live.
Does this ever happen to you? Moments after you're introduced to someone, you forget his or her name. It's a common faux pas you'll want to avoid, especially if you're a job seeker. And even if you're not, here's a tip. As you are being introduced, and while you're still shaking hands, smiling, and making eye contact, say the person's name aloud. Not only does that make a deposit in your memory bank, it acknowledges the other person. And that is more than a nuance, as is maintaining eye contact. With money and attention so scarce now, effective communication skills have never been more important. Cutting through the clutter rather than blending into the blah, blah, blah will help you connect better, no matter what the conversation. For more tips, hit survivalspeech.com. I'm Holland Cook.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. Aides working for U.S. President Joe Biden have found a second set of classified documents, a discovery that has angered Republicans. This latest collection was found in a different, but so far undisclosed, location to the batch of documents that was disclosed on Monday. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Aides reportedly found the latest set of documents while scouring locations, trying to turn up any other paperwork that might remain in locations used by Biden. The first set was discovered in November, but only came to light on Monday after reporting by US media and an acknowledgement from the White House that a small number of documents had been discovered in an office that Joe Biden used after he left the Obama administration in 2017. Republicans, though, are crying foul. Biden heavily criticized former President Donald Trump last year when several dozen boxes of government papers, including more than 100 classified documents, were found during an FBI raid of his Mar-a-Lago property in Florida.
Japan and the UK are stepping up their defensive alliance, signing a landmark security agreement in London on Wednesday. The meeting was part of the Japanese Prime Minister's week-long tour of G7 countries, which culminates in a sit-down with U.S. President Biden on Friday. FSN's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
Following meetings in Paris and Rome, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida met with his UK counterpart Rishi Sunak. The deal signed by the two leaders will allow both countries to deploy their armed forces on each other's soil, as well as hold larger, more complex joint military exercises. They say it'll rapidly accelerate security and defense cooperation between the two countries, and it follows a similar deal Japan made with Australia, as Tokyo looks to expand its military partners around the world. The UK says it cements its commitment to Japan, while Japan's foreign ministry is calling it a breakthrough in creating a free and open Indo-Pacific, which will take the bilateral relationship to new heights.
It was a strong day of trading on Wall Street Wednesday as investors eagerly await the release of some key inflation data. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
With no major economic data out Wednesday, traders had their attention fixed squarely on Thursday's big inflation gauge. Analysts expect December's consumer price index figures to tick down 0.1% compared to the month prior. At the close of trading Wednesday, the Dow was up 0.8%, the S&P 1.3%, and the Nasdaq ended up 1.8% to extend its hot streak into a fourth day.
And finally, influential British guitarist Jeff Beck has died at the age of 78. Beck initially rose to fame in the 1960s as a member of the group the Yardbirds. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
You can stick it to the man and big tech. Join our FTL social mastodon at social.freetalklive.com.
It's Free Talk Live, and you are invited to take control of the airwaves. 603-283-6160. If you would like to do that, that's 603-283-6160. And with you in the studio tonight, it's Aria,
Beakless Mountaineer,
and Nikki.
And we were talking briefly during the break about our TikTok, because we do have a TikTok. You can find it tiktok.freetalklive.com. That's tiktok.freetalklive.com. We're actually... I mentioned that there's going to be a lot in the previous segment for me to clip out and put on our TikTok channel. And I mentioned in the host chat several weeks ago that all people have to do is like make a note of a time frame that something really humorous or entertaining or a really good point is made. It doesn't have to be funny. It doesn't have to be enlightening or particularly intelligent or moving or whatever. It can be any of these things or whatever, as long as it's entertaining. And shoot me the time frame of it. Let me know what the topic is so I know what to look for. If you say, hey, look, it's during this segment, obviously being more specific is going to be better. So
in that first hour,
right.
You said this really neat thing.
Right. So, I mean,
okay.
We want the TikTok channel. At the moment, it's mostly... at the moment, it's entirely nights that I'm on because I'm the only one doing it. Bonnie started the TikTok, in fact, but she sort of dropped off doing it, which is regrettable because she watches more of the show than I do, so she, sees more of it. But I want a wider variety of topics and hosts on the TikTok channel, so you can find it at tiktok.freetalklive.com. We mentioned it earlier in regard to the Conan thing as well. The drag queen clip, it's I think about a minute and a half long. It's one of the longer clips that we have up there because all of the TikTok clips, they tend to be pretty short. It's by far the best performing though, something like 18,000 views at this point, and that was despite being banned from TikTok. And it was temporarily banned for bullying / harassment. Apparently,
look what you did to Conan.
No,
right.
That's what I would have assumed, but no, they meant we were being anti-LGBTQ or we were being anti-drag queen because drag queen isn't necessarily LGBTQ, but yeah. But we were being transphobic or dragphobic or whatever the word would be, right? And so I appealed it. I was like, look, if you listen to the context
going drag
of
is
this,
at least cosplaying as trans, okay? I think we can agree on that.
I think
cosplaying
it's
as women.
It's at least cosplaying transgenderism.
Well, I don't know if it's even that, right? Like if if Nikki was to cosplay as Sashomaru from Inuyasha, which is just a male character, she wouldn't be being a drag king, and there wouldn't be any LGBTQ aspect to it. It would just be her dressing up as a character, right?
Well, she's definitely cosplaying trans though, because she's switching genders.
I don't know that at any rate, we certainly weren't being transphobic. And I appealed the decision saying, hey, look, if you watch this, it's pretty clear from the context that we were arguing against support of drag shows and the right of these people to do what they wanted and the right of someone, if they didn't want to be affiliated with a drag show, to just not go. So it was reinstated. But despite that, it still got to like 18,000 views.
So one of the things that I wanted to just point out there, so it seems to me that both sides of this argument really do have reasonable points. So on one side of this, they're like, well, if you suppress any form of drag shows, including having kids at them, then you are moving us in the direction of suppressing this entirely so that transgender people and then even homosexuals will all have to go underground again. And I can understand that perspective. On the other hand, there's the we really, really, really want to protect our children from all forms of sexual connotation and everything that is overtly sexualized if we can do that.
So don't bring your kids.
But see, drag shows, again, aren't necessarily sexualized. I think this is where a lot of
I think that's where there's just going to have to be a difference of subjective opinion.
I realize that you disagree on that, but that's not the way that most people mean when they say drag shows are sexual. They think that they're up there dancing, doing booty dances and stuff like that. That's what they mean when they say sexual. They don't mean wearing makeup in and of itself is inherently sexual. That's not what those people mean. So when you say it's sexual, I want to be clear that you mean something fundamentally different than what the Republicans and conservatives.
When
they say that drag shows are sexual, they think that drag shows that at Drag Queen Story Hour that the drag queens are showing up in G-strings with dildos on their forehead.
And they're not.
That's what they mean.
I just think wearing makeup, even if it's very, dark and, very pigmented, and having large breasts isn't inherently sexual.
I agree with you on that. But let's go to the phones.
I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree on that.
That's all right.
Well, we are sexual creatures, and in that sense, having breasts is sexual because humans are sexual, and that's a sexual characteristic.
Like, if I shove like a whole wad of socks down my pants, I'm being overtly sexual. Like if I put on these giant, like if I put on football pads to enhance my giant shoulders, like yeah, I'm enhancing the secondary sexual characteristic of masculinity.
So then, to that point, it's almost like we're all being sexual all the time.
To some extent.
So then what's wrong with drag queens?
That it's way more than they're comfortable with.
In which case, no one can be around children, right? Because everyone's sexual all the time.
Sexual all the time, yeah, for sure.
They probably feel uncomfortable with a certain amount of makeup around their kids. Yeah, they probably feel uncomfortable with girls in G-strings parading in front of their kids.
But G-strings and makeup, like, you can't compare that, though.
I think that is
that's like totally different.
Yeah, I think that is a very unique take that I think what you're talking about sexually is fundamentally different from what the conservatives are talking about sexually.
But maybe not, though.
I don't disagree that obviously wearing red lipstick is meant to simulate sexual arousal. It's obviously, in that context, wearing lipstick is sexual. But that's not what conservatives mean when they say drag shows are sexual. They don't mean that wearing lipstick is in and of itself sexual. They mean they're up there basically doing strip teases in front of 5-year-olds. That's what they mean.
Some drag shows are like that.
Absolutely,
yes,
but typically, hopefully, the adult one, like 18 plus. Like there will be a lot of drag shows that are like 18, 21 plus.
But the ones but the drag queen story hours, they're not doing that they're not doing strip teases.
More clothes, less twerking.
They're just wearing the makeup and the women's clothes and the wigs and that sort of thing. But let's go to the phones. We have Major Payne on the line from Michigan. Major, you're on Free Talk Live.
Yeah, I got a couple of quickies here. Well, one's not a quickie, but one is I was listening the night of the Conan episode, and I can see why he'd be a little bit butthurt, because you guys kind of made him feel like the village idiot.
He was laughing with us.
I remember making a comment when I called in and say I had to call in and give Conan a little backup here, because you guys was on him like ducks on a June bug. But
hold on, because let's go back to the episode in question. He was saying that, the part in question, he literally said that if they could get away with it, drag queens would be reading kids stories while wearing bikinis with dildos strapped to their foreheads. We could say we were ganging up on him and being mean and all of that, but that's a ridiculous statement, and that statement is worth laughing at. And I think he knew that because he was laughing as he said it.
Well,
I think you were laughing at two different things at that point. He was laughing at the absurdity of what our society has become, and you were laughing at his perception of what society has become.
Possibly.
Well, there was a clip at one of the drag shows with one of the girls having a dildo stuck somewhere where it wasn't quite natural. And I think he just kind of went with that and ran with it a little bit too far, maybe.
We were also talking about one of these child drag queens. I don't remember the person's age at this point, but he was watching the video with us where he was like, "Look, you see these grown men like throwing."
Oh yeah, you talking about that little 10-year-old that was butt dancing around for all these.
But that isn't what happened. We saw the video, and he watched the video with us, and there were no dirty old men throwing money at this kid. But that didn't stop him from seeing it and from reporting it as though it had happened. He was seeing something that was not in the video.
So you both watched the same video and saw two completely different things?
Yes.
That's crazy.
That's wild.
All right.
Now, to back up the Major on this, one of the issues that I do see in general with our format. So there's 3 seats here, and very frequently what ends up happening is that it's 2-on-1. Very frequently, and this isn't always a bad thing, but like very frequently I've seen like you and Ian gang up against Mark. Now, that has been some of our most entertaining footage, for sure, but it doesn't change the fact that you can feel ganged up on if you happen to be that third person.
I don't doubt that at all. With me, Mark, and Ian, that's a shtick, really. And Mark and Ian and I don't think we've sat down, discussed it, and like planned it out, but we all know that's
That's just what happens to Mark when he's on the show.
Well, I don't know if that's what happens to Mark, but...
It's what he gets for turning statist on us.
Right?
But that is... I mean, that is the dynamic that's at play here. Let's not forget that at one point, Mark sat across from me and said, you lady boys or whatever it is you call yourself, and pointed at me, and like, that's part of the... It's just part of the dynamic of how we're interacting and how we're creating a show together.
I thought that was an almost exclusively Thai thing. Anyway.
Oh, right.
Yes. I don't remember.
No, they have like a special word in that language that basically translates as ladyboy.
Yeah.
But I even took a screenshot of him, angrily holding the microphone and pointing at me like that as he called me a ladyboy. And I posted on Twitter, radio host calls Aria ladyboy on the air or something like that. And I mean, certainly, Mark, Ian, and I are certainly going to be worse about that than a lot of people would be, but it's also completely done in the name of fun.
Yeah.
All right. So I got some news that's been buried. You remember that infrastructure bill that they shoved down our throats? It was like 7,000 pages, and the guys got like 24 hours to review it.
Oh, the most recent one.
Well, anyway, what was buried in there was a little tidbit that Sarah's just going to love.
What is it?
Not surprised.
They're going to have to put mandatory kill switches in all vehicles.
Yeah. I think we covered that on the show.
Yeah, Nikki, you brought it in.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure no one will die as an effect of this. Totally safe.
Yeah, I thought that just broke. But anyway, yeah, it's this is so hackable, so backdoorable by the cops. I mean, it's just...
Yeah. Man, I've got a related story.
Well, dude.
Have you heard about these digital license plates in California, man?
No.
Yeah, it's just like a normal license plate, except it's digital. It's a screen.
Hate it already.
Yeah, where they can just digitally program it to display your license plate code, your letters and your numbers or whatever.
For what? Like, what is the point of that?
Well, the appeal is that you can customize the message down at the bottom. So like, go sports team or whatever you want it to say.
Well, why not put just a little thing at the bottom that you can customize?
Well, that would make too much sense, right?
So when these things glitch out and stop working.
Well, there's some, exactly. Each one, it has a battery life, and the battery is only good for about 30 days. As it turns out.
So it sounds like just another reason, because when you're driving with snow on your license plate and the cops can't see it, they pull you over and they say, I can't see your license plate number, so I needed to pull you over. This is just another reason to give cops to pull people over.
That's certainly possible. One of the selling points of this is that, like, you use an app to control it because, of course, you have to have an app to control your license plate at this point because humanity's not doomed quite yet enough. So
we shouldn't even have license plates.
Obviously.
Well, no, hold on. So you brought that up the other day, and the actual reason, like a reasonable reason to have license plate is so, like, if you hit someone with your car, we can go, okay, it was that person's car and not that person's car. So there is some purpose to having an identifiable distinction for your vehicle.
Maybe to an extent.
But it shouldn't be. I shouldn't be forced to have one on my car.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem.
But if
it's forced, and you have to go through this very specific thing. Like not even you have to have some way of doing this, but no, you have to have this way of doing it. That surprise,
and pay the state
money.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
But if we weren't focus grouped into 3 different types of vehicles, that would be less of an issue anyway. I don't need a license plate on my car for everyone who sees it to know, yep, that's Aria, because I'm the only person driving around a Mitsubishi Eclipse, from what I can tell, in the state of New Hampshire. However, everyone else is driving a hatchback. Everyone else is driving a hatchback or a sports sedan or what is the other one? Or an SUV. There's only 3 models of vehicle.
Yeah.
It's exactly as bad as North Korea, where in North Korea you have 16 official haircuts that are available for women, and that's it.
You forgot pickup truck.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's technically more than 3.
She didn't forget. She suppressed it.
There's also Jeeps and stuff, right? So, I mean, literally 3 is not correct, but every vehicle in the United States, it does fall into a few basic categories, and it's every bit as bad as North Korea's. These are the official haircuts you can have, or these are the official car models you could have in North Korea. The only difference in the United States is that it's the result of focus groups and safety testing and all of these other things instead of a bureaucrat saying, these are the only allowable ones. So that's the issue there, is that we've been focus grouped to the extent that every vehicle is indistinguishable from every other. My other car, I have a Ford Fiesta, and for the life of me, I can't find a single feature that makes it different from any other sedan on the road, which is, a sedan is just, I think, a just basic four-door car, right?
Yeah. Or two-door.
I thought that defines as a sports car. Yeah.
But I thought a coupe was a type of sedan.
I don't know.
I think sports cars are kind of coupe, and two doors a coupe, a 4 doors a sedan. I could be wrong. I'm not exactly a car guy.
I'm not either, but you see every Toyota, every 4-door car out there could be any other 4-door car out there, and there's just, I can't tell the difference between any of them. So in that sense, yes, we need a license plate to distinguish one car from another. Anyway, the reason I brought this license plate up is I understand the appeal, and one of the selling points is that obviously you have this app and you put your car in lock mode, right? Which is, okay, my car is locked, I'm going to work or whatever. If the app then detects your car is moving, then it will change your license plate to display the word stolen, which you can understand that's a neat feature. That immediately tells the cops that anyone who sees that car driving by that it's been stolen. Right?
Unless you forget to unlock it.
Yeah.
Well, there's obviously some pitfalls like that, in which case you get pulled over and you're like, no, officer, look, I have the app here, whatever.
Too bad. Gonna have to bring you in.
Right. But it creates so many obvious problems of, oh, well, you didn't pay that parking ticket, so we're going to change your license plate. We're going to invalidate it on the spot like that. Mm-hmm. And that's, it's not good.
Straight out of Fifth Element.
Yeah. That's what we're heading towards. Thank you so much for the call tonight, Major. I've had that license plate story in my show prep for a few days now because it's tremendously fascinating. It's such a bad idea, right? Why do Americans keep doing, or people in general, the Internet of Things? Everything has to be digital. What need is there to have a digital license plate? Are you people serious?
Well, and it's just, the big issue with it is, as I do like a lot of prepping and things like that, and just trying to be sustainable, right? Like if the power goes out or something, I want to be able to, be completely efficient without needing to rely on things like electricity and whatever else. People just keep straying further and further away from it. And as I find things from 100 years ago, 50 years ago, they still work perfectly fine. And they're actually more efficient than a lot of our digital things, or, so I just don't know why we keep straying in that direction when they seem very ineffective and, Well,
I think a lot of it really just comes down to our money system. So the whole fiat currency, the constantly increasing how many dollars there is, puts this huge weight on consumption.
Yeah.
Like everything is levered toward greater and greater consumption. Well, at a certain point, you can't consume anymore unless you break it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, this works, so I don't need another one. Well, we'll just make it so that it breaks after a month or a year or whatever.
But then there are so many more long-term impacts of that because of consumerism and people buying things and just throwing them away because they don't want them anymore because they break. Now we have piles and piles of trash surrounding our planet, Well,
and my point is that the consumerism is the effect of the money system. If we didn't have a system where everything was inflating all of the time, because people have finally noticed the inflation because it's gotten ridiculous. But the inflation, what they're aiming for and what they will change things to make sure is happening is 2%. So it's always inflating. So it causes rabid consumerism because the environment will not allow any other behavior.
Right. The worst thing you can do with the USD is to hold on to it for a single solitary minute, because it's going to buy less tomorrow than it will buy today. So even if it's just buying a battery, it makes more sense to buy that battery than it does to hold on to the USD. And to speak to the question of waste and all of that, these things have batteries. That's so insane to me because, first of all, it seems
couldn't you just couldn't you just hook it into the car? Like, you have a whole electrical system right there.
I would expect something like that, or maybe
there was a handy-dandy generator. Oh, right
the
there.
car.
Or, I mean, there's any number of possibilities here. Even a little solar panel. How much electricity could this... And, I mean, yes, okay, a solar panel is not going to produce enough electricity to power one of these things, but that's kind of the issue. If it needs that much electricity, what benefit does it have that a stupid license plate doesn't bring to the table? On top of that, the real issue with this whole Internet of Things nonsense is it eludes most people, but the IT security is not taken seriously by anyone who's programming and creating this nonsense.
Absolutely.
I did IT for the better part of 10 years, and let me tell you, no one's taking IT seriously. When they made your smart television, they never even they took no steps to making it unhackable.
Right.
And it's just a matter of time before there's ransomware for your fridge, and you're being told that if you want to be able to open your fridge and have access to your milk or whatever, then you're going to have to pay 0.001 Bitcoin to some ransomware. And you're going to
We should be so lucky.
You're going to, right.
I guarantee you it'll be dollars. And you better spend $100 today or it'll disappear.
No, ransomware is always in cryptocurrency.
Oh, you mean free market ransomware as opposed to the captured ransomware of the US government. Sorry, you made a jump there that I didn't see.
Oh, yes, I mean actual ransomware being infected onto people's devices, because it's going to happen. And cars, this should terrify people. The smart car, the the internet connected car.
If you don't do this, I'm going to crash your car off this bridge.
Right, but they don't think anything about it.
The whole registry of car system, like the whole thing from top to bottom, every speeding ticket, every parking ticket, the whole thing is based on ransomware. It's like, okay, well, we have your vehicle at ransom because we own all of the streets that exist.
Yes,
so
but none of that...
If you want to use what's yours, you better give us this.
Yes, but that's none of that, A, keeps your vehicle from cranking, or B, has the ability to drive your vehicle into a tree at 80 miles per hour.
I mean, even the kill switch that the government is forcing car manufacturers to put in the cars, even that is so dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
And the way all of these things can malfunction. I mean, if your 1950 Chevy breaks down, you can pull over on the side of the road. If you have a toolkit, you can probably fix it right then and there, unless it needs a new part.
Yep.
You can probably make it go and you can get home. You can't do that with these brand new cars. You can't do that with these electric cars.
No, and this ransomware stuff is coming. There will come a time where you have to worry about the possibility of you're driving home and suddenly it plays over your stereo that your car has been hit with ransomware. And if you don't pay X amount of cryptocurrency, it's going to drive you into a tree and kill you. What do? You have to pay that ransom. And people can already, the headlights are being hacked by, that's the back door. Just look into it, because I can't think of the examples, and we don't have time now for me to get into it before we get into the subject. But the Internet of Things is a terrible idea. It's not secure, and it's going to destroy people's lives. There's more coming up here. It is Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, the show where anyone can call about whatever they want. And we do mean anyone.
There are such things called a breatharian. And you know what? George Norrie doesn't eat, sleep, or drink either. Did you know that? Yes. You know what? He never gets tired.
George Norrie, the host of Coast to Coast AM, you believe... Let me just make sure I heard you correctly. You don't believe that he drinks, that he eats, and that he sleeps? Is that what you said? I just want to make sure I heard you correctly.
They're ascended masters. They don't have to be here. They come here to teach people and to enlighten people. And George Norrie and I think Art Bell might be one. Their blood content is gold. See, they don't have to be here.
Their blood content is gold? Is that what you just said?
Yes. That's right. You know what? Our content is iron. Their constitution is gold.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
There are basically two types of advertising, direct response and branding. Radio's great for direct response with its low cost to listener ratio, but audio can't be beat for branding, which is a longer term endeavor. You want to be the first thing that someone thinks of when they think about your product or service. If you have a local business that you want kept top of mind in your community, call the station. If you need national reach, Free Talk Live's got around 200 radio stations, millions of monthly listening sessions, can suit all budgets, and if we don't think we're right for you, we'll tell you. Email me, mark@freetalklive.com.
If you want to know the latest about Free Talk Live before we go on the air, all you need to decide is how you want it delivered. It's your choice. Visit news.freetalklive.com to receive our usually weekly news updates by email. Plus, we have a Twitter account at twitter.freetalklive.com, and you can follow us on the decentralized Mastodon platform at toot.freetalklive.com. So please follow us at toot.freetalklive.com and sign up for our emails at news.freetalklive.com.
You're listening to the live edition of Free Talk Live. Hour number 3 is next after the news here on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. Aides working for U.S. President Joe Biden have found a second set of classified documents, a discovery that has angered Republicans. This latest collection was found in a different, but so far undisclosed, location to the batch of documents that was disclosed on Monday. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Aides reportedly found the latest set of documents while scouring locations, trying to turn up any other paperwork that might remain in locations used by Biden. The first set was discovered in November, but only came to light on Monday after reporting by US media and an acknowledgement from the White House that a small number of documents had been discovered in an office that Joe Biden used after he left the Obama administration in 2017. Republicans, though, are crying foul. Biden heavily criticized former President Donald Trump last year when several dozen boxes of government papers, including more than 100 classified documents, were found during an FBI raid of his Mar-a-Lago property in Florida.
Japan and the UK are stepping up their defensive alliance, signing a landmark security agreement in London on Wednesday. The meeting was part of the Japanese Prime Minister's week-long tour of G7 countries, which culminates in a sit-down with U.S. President Biden on Friday. FSN's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
Following meetings in Paris and Rome, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida met with his UK counterpart Rishi Sunak. The deal signed by the two leaders will allow both countries to deploy their armed forces on each other's soil, as well as hold larger, more complex joint military exercises. They say it'll rapidly accelerate security and defense cooperation between the two countries, and it follows a similar deal Japan made with Australia, as Tokyo looks to expand its military partners around the world. The UK says it cements its commitment to Japan, while Japan's foreign ministry is calling it a breakthrough in creating a free and open Indo-Pacific, which will take the bilateral relationship to new heights.
It was a strong day of trading on Wall Street Wednesday as investors eagerly await the release of some key inflation data. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
With no major economic data out Wednesday, traders had their attention fixed squarely on Thursday's big inflation gauge. Analysts expect December's consumer price index figures to tick down 0.1% compared to the month prior. At the close of trading Wednesday, the Dow was up 0.8%, the S&P 1.3%, and the Nasdaq ended up 1.8% to extend its hot streak into a fourth day.
And finally, influential British guitarist Jeff Beck has died at the age of 78. Beck initially rose to fame in the 1960s as a member of the group the Yardbirds. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks. Today, the uncompromising words of one of the world's leading humanitarian aid chiefs about the repression of women in Afghanistan. Jan Egeland is a former Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. Today, he runs the Norwegian Refugee Council. It has been one of the principal sources of humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan, but has now shut its operations down after the Taliban said its female staff, along with those employed by other NGOs, were no longer permitted to work. So Mr. Egeland is in Kabul trying to get the Taliban to change their minds.
Without our female colleagues, we cannot work. We will not work. We are not able to provide for the women of Afghanistan but we would also not be a principled employer if we agreed to this. We are not giving aid to the hundreds of thousands of people we serve here in Afghanistan, and it's raining, it's snowing, it's miserable, and not to give them aid is so painful for us.
He's had a series of talks with Taliban officials since he arrived on Sunday and has secured support for his campaign from several foreign embassies in the Afghan capital. But there is no sign yet that the Taliban are ready to capitulate, putting more than 2 million Afghans who have relied on aid from Mr. Egeland's organisation at risk. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. Aides working for President Biden find a second set of classified documents, a discovery that has angered Republicans. Japan and the UK sign a landmark security agreement as the two countries look to step up their defensive alliance. And Wall Street sees a strong day of trading as investors eagerly await the release of some key inflation data. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
Shortly after being fired from his coding position at a downsizing tech firm, 34-year-old Irvine native Sam Morrison told reporters Monday that he believed he had finally achieved the sort of work-life balance for which he has long strived.
Ever since I got fired, it just seems like my whole entire routine is just clicking. I go for jogs in the afternoon, spend nights with my wife and kid. I'm even cooking more. Everything just feels right.
Morrison, who since his termination has found time to pick up reading again, eat a healthy diet, and sleep more than 5 hours a night, noted that his unemployment has allowed him to find a level of harmony in his personal life that he never before thought possible.
For a while there, I thought that I was going to spend the rest of my life constantly worrying about getting to the office on time and pleasing my boss. Outside of the late payments on the house, the mounting credit card debt, the rapidly depleting savings, my life is essentially stress-free. I honestly couldn't be happier.
This is the Onion News Network.
Don't miss a moment of Free Talk Live. Get our archives daily via our podcast at feeds.freetalklive.com. Free Talk Live.
It is Free Talk Live. As always, you're invited to join us 603-283-6160 if you'd like to do that. Again, that's 603-283-6160. With you in the studio tonight is Aria,
Faithless Mountaineer,
and Nikki.
And we talked earlier about anxiety a bit. Anxiety, depression, those sorts of things, PTSD. And I got to be honest with you. The American education system, it tends to cause anxiety, depression, and I don't know about PTSD, but maybe. It causes all of these things itself because it sucks. There was no part of... For those who are new to the show, we're probably above average intelligence here on Free Talk Live. I suspect that's a fair assessment.
Seems that way,
right?
yeah.
And
I can prove that one.
I don't know about...
Oh, no, on myself.
Okay.
I took a test.
Awesome.
I'm somewhere above 130, which honestly, once you get to 130, like, what's the point?
Right. So I suspect we're above average at least, and we know the public school system sucks, and everyone seems to know that. I've never met anyone who's like, man, the public education system sure is great.
Even teachers complain about it.
Right. And I mean, they're welfare whores and they hate
they don't know that part, though.
Well, some of them, okay, fair point.
I think most of them probably don't.
But it's
they tend not to think of themselves that way.
It's an absolutely horrific experience, and
Truly.
It's designed for the dumbest segments of the population, right? It's no matter how dumb, how can I put this? You have to forgive me. I was educated in the public school system, so I'm struggling to figure out how to put it. But if you're it's designed for the really dumb people. So if you're not one of those really dumb people,
lowest common denominator.
Yeah,
sort of focus.
Right, obviously. But if you're not that dumb person, you're going to immediately eclipse the criteria that you're learning in school, and they're going to hammer it year after year after year. It continues to boggle my mind that we learned multiplication in the second grade, and we continued learning it in the third grade, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, and the seventh, and the eighth. And it wasn't until my ninth grade year that we actually learned a new element of mathematics, which was geometry. Other than that, it was just algebra and easier versions of algebra with addition and subtraction and all
Well,
of
you
that.
shouldn't have been so smart.
Right, but 8 years, obviously. 8 years of learning the same thing.
Well, they still can't do it, so clearly that wasn't enough.
And the same with English and grammar. 8 years of learning to use commas before. And and you still have adults who can't use commas. The American education system is a complete joke.
Well, the public education system throughout the world is a complete joke.
Absolutely. So maybe you're out there trying to find a different solution. The Socratic Experience may be able to help. Check it out at SocraticExperience.com/FTL. That's our link to download the parent guide. That's SocraticExperience.com/FTL. It'll get you 20% off your first year's tuition. This is for people who are frustrated with the public school system. They know it doesn't work, and they're seeking an alternative to raise their kids, to educate their children in a way that isn't going to cause anxiety and depression and stupidity and a waste of time. Because that's what public school system ultimately is, a complete waste of time. I ended up dropping out.
It's worse than that. Like a waste of time, you are where you were minus the time. Public education, you are so much further back and you have so much garbage in your head that simply is not true.
No, I literally have trauma from public school.
I don't doubt it at all.
It's prison. Yeah,
Well,
it's prison for children.
And this is why when I called in, I was like, no, just because, like, if I have a kid and they're like, hey, I want to go to public school, we'll discuss it. But I'm not just going to acquiesce to that because, like, no, it is dangerous. It is dangerous to your mind. It is dangerous to your system of values. It's dangerous to your body. So, no.
I agree with that.
There doesn't appear to be very much about it that's actually good. That's certainly, you're right, Nikki, that they are
Well, it
prisons.
frees up that second parent to not have to watch the kid.
Exactly.
The school that I went to had multiple buildings on the campus, and that was good, I would argue, because at least we got some fresh air going from one class to the other. But that campus was replaced, and the school that I went to didn't go to, but it relocated to a single building that is fenced all around it and has...
Like a prison.
What? I'm not kidding. It has razor wire on top of the fence. And this is presumably to keep people out, right? To keep the clowns out.
Yeah, which way is it facing?
Right? But let's just bask in the reality that this public school is identical to a prison.
So I remember when I was 18 years old or so, one of my boyfriends went to jail and I was going to visit him while he was in jail. And I was mortified when I stepped in to the Department of Corrections to visit him, and it had the same floors, the same ceilings, the same walls. It looked exactly like at least the public schools I've been to in the state of Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Identical. It looked the same on the outside, looked the same on the inside. It smelled the same.
Yeah,
it literally smelled the same.
They have the same people designing them. They have the same technologies
I wonder
in
why.
both of them. Like they have like, oh, well, we're experimenting with this technology to increase docility or to punish unruly prisoners / students. And they'll try the same technology in public schools.
Yeah, that's not
and
a
in
coincidence.
prisons.
I think the only difference between public schools and prisons is that prisons have narrower windows. Honestly, I think that was the only meaningful difference. But the schools are horrible places. The Socratic Experience offers a way out. SocraticExperience.com/FTL if you want to learn more about it. Let's go to the phones. We have Alu Axelman on the line from Liberty Block, who lives here in New Hampshire. Alu, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, what's on your mind tonight?
I want to respond to Ian, I think, last night, or a few nights ago, because I'm behind because of the baby. I'm a little behind on podcasts, so I am catching up.
Yeah, congrats on the baby, by the way.
I'm going to catch up. Yeah, thank you.
This was the bullet thing, right? Was it?
Yes.
Alu? Okay. I didn't connect those until like last night when I was like, wait, hold on. Okay. And I don't have the wherewithal to explain that. So that was between me and Nikki.
Yeah, was like the first time in my life I heard him be almost pessimistic about the crypto use in New Hampshire, which I think, crypto use is not super totally ubiquitous in New Hampshire, and maybe it has decreased in years, but I got to correct him and say, at least in the Liberty community, so maybe I'm a bit biased, or I'm in a bit of an echo chamber or something, there's a lot of use of crypto, gold, and silver. I can look at my records. I record everything, and my book sales, around 10, 20, 25% has been in alternatives. When I sell books, I've sold 700 books total. Around 10, 20% comes in gold, X, silver, or crypto. So it's a decent amount in alternatives. I paid for lots of things. Yesterday at the gym, I saw a guy setting up a table there selling beef jerky. I bought that for gold backs. Turns out he already accepts them. I bought, and I got a water heater replaced for my boiler, and I paid the guy in gold backs today for that, like big purchases. It was a big one. So a lot of people accept gold backs in the community, so I have to correct him on that. But also,
I don't recall anything that Ian had said last night that could have come across as pessimistic.
I'm behind. This is like 4 nights ago, probably.
So I see what you're saying with within the community. Sure, within the Liberty community in New Hampshire, we do have a thriving little market of alternative currencies, specifically long-term focused currencies. But it ain't what it used to be. Like, there are places that are, there's a private club in Manchester that we used to have a whole bunch of okay, here are the QR codes for the various cryptos that we accept. And that was just a thing. And that was normalized. Like, okay, well, if you want this soda, you can just pay in Dash or you can pay in Bitcoin Cash. And that's all gone. There were a bunch of not know your customer Bitcoin vending machines that were also available. And all of that disappeared when the feds broke down the doors and windows of this very studio. As soon as that happened, it spooked so much of even our local community.
It wasn't if you don't use it, you lose it, is what Ian was saying, which I agree, and it's a shame. Like, people really should, like at Murphy's and all the other stores that are very crypto friendly, they should go and get a beer there once in a while and pay in crypto, just so the waitresses know how to do it, because they do it more than once.
Yeah, that's why I don't go there anymore.
That was very much the issue. And when the German they weren't a film crew, the German crew was out here, that was one of the stories that I attempted to convey to them. What you look at now when you go down Main Street in Keene, and when I historically have given the crypto tour here in Keene, when people come to visit, I take them around and I show them all the places that accept cryptocurrency. And now it's a hollow shell of what it was 3 years ago. And the story that I portrayed to the Germans when they were visiting is not, look, welcome to the crypto mecca, and here are all of these places that accept cryptocurrency. It was, you're coming after the crypto mecca has been sacked. That's the reality of what we're dealing with here. And
yeah, but I'm still
probably
over the next few years, because of inflation and so many other issues, crypto is picking up still, I think.
Well, maybe, but dude, I've lived it, and I've seen it here in Keene, and I don't know if it's going to be back or not, but it's down, and it's down for a reason. That's because your biggest advocates for it are legally not able to be out there pimping it to people.
Yeah. Well, and one of the big issues here is the whole know your customer practice. And the whole point of money, the purpose of money, is to not know who you're doing business with. The whole point was, look, I can only know a Dunbar's number of people. So I can keep track with those people of who's up on who owes what to whom. But outside of that, I can't pay people back, and I can't expect to get paid back. But with money, I don't have to know you.
Someone as smart as Peakless Mountaineer, I'm sure, knows what crypto means, like what the root of the word actually means. It means like
cryptographically secured currency.
Secret. Yeah, that's the whole point.
Yeah. Anything else you wanted to talk about tonight, Ali?
Yeah, you mentioned Damar Hamlin. I did a video. It's on Odyssey. YouTube already kicked me off, especially they would for this, for the question for the fascism vaccines. So I did a video on Damar Hamlin, and it does look like it actually was commotion cordis. I mean, we did learn about it in the EMT school and medical school and stuff. It's pretty rare, but it could happen. I'm surprised it doesn't happen more in football. But it doesn't seem like it's vaccine related. But the other thousands of players who are fainting and or dying in NFL and soccer, those probably are from the vaccine, from myocarditis or something.
Well,
but
as I learned from a very wise meme, if they can assume that because you had COVID and died, you died from COVID, then we can assume that if you had the vaccine and died, that you died from the vaccine. That just seems fair.
You would think so.
Excellent point. But I actually mentioned in my video, no one seemed to mention like the one simplest thing where it could have been commotio cordis, which is pretty much when you get a big stimulus, either a shock or a big thump that can send 10, 20, 50 joules of energy into your heart. It's like a small shock. If you get that at a certain point in the interval, which now everyone knows, commotio cordis was trending on Twitter after this, pretty much if it hits you on the upstroke of the T wave right after the depolarization of the ventricles.
Well, yeah, but you pointed out this doesn't happen more often. Like, how many hits happen in games? An unbelievable number.
Well, I think what he's saying is it's very uncommon in that some of the other incidents could have been due to the vaccine, but in this incident, it seems more likely.
Yeah, but so Nikki, are you familiar with long QT?
Yes, not very much, but yes.
Every medication can prolong the QT segment.
Yeah, most of them, even like Zofran and stuff like that.
Yeah, Zofran does. Pretty much everything does. But anyway, here's the thing. Why do we worry about elongation of the QT segment? Because that makes it more likely that you have.
Dude, none of this means anything to me as a layperson, man.
I'm not even a layperson, and it's going way over my head.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about what it... Yeah, I mean, thank you. Okay, thank you for the call tonight. This is going way over my head.
We're getting off into the weeds here.
And thank you for the call, Alu, but realistically, it's way more simple than that. And I'm sure your video, people can find you at, I'm sure it's at Liberty Block. That's how people can find you on Odyssey. I'm sure your video goes in wonderful detail about it, but it's really quite simple. Here's a professional athlete in the sport where they smash into each other, and he had a heart problem when they smashed into each other. That's not, to me, that's...
The job is smashing into people.
Like, it's... The NFL has this big thing now about people getting concussed. We're like, yeah, they smash into each other day after day after day. Of course, eventually someone's going to get a concussion, brain damage, a sort of thing, right? Of course, someone eventually is going to have some sort of heart attack while this is happening. It's not surprising to me at all in this sport where people, big burly dudes, smash into each other at full speed. Eventually, someone's going to get hurt.
And I think I know I've witnessed firsthand a lot of vaccine side effects. But I think people saying every single person that is healthy and then has something happen, they're like, it's the vaccine, it's the vaccine, it's the vaccine. It's not always the vaccine. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And I think people are just making a lot of assumptions all the time that aren't necessarily valid.
So two things on that. Number one, as far as like, was it the vaccine? Was it not the vaccine? Now, the fact is there are so many things that it could be that it probably was something other than the vaccine. However, of the possible causes, that is the highest single probability of like one singular, at least primary cause.
I mean, I wouldn't know because I don't have his records and I don't know his history and stuff. So like, that's a thing where we don't know these people. We don't know their medical history, and we're just making assumptions. It kind of, we need more information to even be able to make an accurate assumption.
Well, and that's one of the big issues
can theorize,
with this, is that we are never going to have accurate information on what the danger of this medical treatment is.
No, and libertarians have a huge blind spot in this area more than any others, right? Like, I know almost everyone I know is vaccinated. Everyone outside of Free Talk Live here is vaccinated. Almost everyone you see in the supermarkets or at your other job they've at least gotten one of these shots, right? How many people do we know who dropped dead of myocarditis or whatever, or some random heart attack, right?
Not including work, none.
Yeah, almost none. So, but libertarians, they point to this one example. Oh, look, the vaccine's killing people. It's like, okay, maybe. It seems to be killing people about as effectively as COVID-19 killed people, though.
Yeah.
It's not very effective at all.
You know what
groups, though. Like COVID-19 was not killing athletes. It wasn't killing people that were already healthy.
Well, we don't know who it was killing or wasn't
It
killing.
was killing fat people.
So
I'm sure plenty of athletes died of COVID-19.
We do know that the comorbidities was a huge question. Like, if you had these comorbidities, then your risk assessment was totally different.
Diabetes, being fat, and or whatever, bariatric, I'll use a nicer word, or having heart problems,
Right.
or other respiratory issues.
Right.
Those were the people that were dying of COVID. Vaccine, it seems more random. If it even is the vaccine, we're not really sure. It might be, but what I will say about the vaccine is, typically, I'm going to assume that I'm probably the only person at my job that is unvaccinated. Maybe there's a couple other people, but let me tell you, COVID goes around that place. Pretty much every single person that works on my unit was passing it. You know, they were taking turns getting it for like a 2-month period. I was one of the only ones that did not get it. Every single person that I work with every night, side by side, as close as we are right now, I was the one person that didn't get it. So clearly, your vaccine doesn't work if I'm unvaccinated, and I did not get COVID, and everyone that is vaccinated did.
I've seen that happen quite a lot. And I don't know if it's COVID or not, but like, I see a lot of people getting colds and stuff. And I remember, guys, 2 years ago, if you had a cold, you were a leper. You weren't allowed to go to work. And how dare you even try to come to work? You monster. You're evil. You're a manslaughterer. But now, oh, no, it's probably just a cold. People are behaving now as they should have 2 years ago. And as libertarians were behaving 2 years ago, guys, it's just a cold. Well, everyone, please calm down. Some amount of apologies, I think, are necessary for the overreactions that we dealt with, but they're never going to come.
Right.
And, of course, libertarians, they do have this blind spot that we were talking about where they seem to think, they point to this athlete who dropped dead or who had this heart attack or whatever, died suddenly is a thing, right? That people are dying suddenly, but it's not happening in the streets. The way libertarians portray it, there are dead bodies. Libertarians are portraying people dropping dead in the streets in the same way that the hysterical people were portraying COVID 2.5 years ago.
Yeah. And I actually do want to correct myself, because when you asked if we knew anyone personally who has, dropped dead of myocarditis or something similar that didn't really make sense, I actually can think of like 3 or 4 people. One was a man in his 60s and totally, completely healthy and just got a heart attack, and not completely impossible. But it's hard to not theorize, like, well, he got back, like this, it could have been the vaccine. It's hard to not theorize that. And I remember even my sister asked me, she's like, am I crazy for like seeing this happen and, just automatically assuming this? And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be honest. That's what I'm automatically assuming. Doesn't necessarily mean, correlation is not causation, but...
Well, 2 of the things. So one thing is that nothing ever has just one cause.
Yeah,
you
of
have
course.
like a big cause, a proximal cause, but I mean, everything has a bunch of little causes. So if someone gets a heart attack, I'm sure there were a bunch of little things that contributed to every single heart attack, even if there was one big thing that really catalyzed the event. But, okay, so if we have this big potential catalyst, that is worth looking at.
Yeah.
And the other part of this is, so if someone in their 60s has a heart attack, that's really not that much of a surprise. I mean, it's still kind of a surprise.
But to just die, I mean, that's surprising.
Yeah. Whereas young, healthy athletes, I mean, when you have like, okay, well, in the last couple years, we've had 1,000 athletes die with an average age of 23 from this same kind of thing.
You start to wonder.
And it's taken decades to get 1,000 dead athletes before this. That's awful suspicious.
Yeah, and I will say, and I've said this on the show before too, when I was working in the hospital, I would get people who got their first or their second dose 3-4 days before, and they were perfectly healthy before, or maybe not, but whatever. And now they're coming in with strokes, heart attacks, blood clots, all sorts of random stuff. And I'm like, we have to wonder, they got their first or second dose days before, and now they're here. Like, you have to wonder. And it doesn't get reported into VAERS because you have to wait that 2-week period until they're vaccinated. So that doesn't even get reported.
There's a lot that we're never going to know about this, and I think it's tragic. I don't want to take the risk in any direction, and I see no point in taking the risk in any direction. The athlete thing, that's certainly weird, but I don't find it too unbelievable that a professional football player got smashed into and it gave him a heart problem. 603-283-6160. There's more coming up. It is Free Talk Live.
Hey, you are going to love the movie Victimless Crime Spree. It's hilarious, heartwarming, and carries a ton of inspiring freedom messages. Feeling down about the lack of liberty in your life? You need to put on this film with some friends and have a good laugh. It's a true story about me and my friends in New Hampshire living free, singing, dancing, and getting arrested. Of course, it's all on video, and the bad guys, the cops, judges, bailiffs, and sheriffs, they all play their part like it's out of a movie or something. You would think we scripted the whole thing, but it's real life. Go ahead and have a watch, and if it's been a while, have another look. I guarantee you'll notice things now that you didn't notice before. And the best part is that you're going to walk away feeling a renewed sense of your own power. You are the master of your destiny, and you will be free in your lifetime. Victimless Crime Spree.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. Aides working for U.S. President Joe Biden have found a second set of classified documents, a discovery that has angered Republicans. This latest collection was found in a different, but so far undisclosed, location to the batch of documents that was disclosed on Monday. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Aides reportedly found the latest set of documents while scouring locations, trying to turn up any other paperwork that might remain in locations used by Biden. The first set was discovered in November, but only came to light on Monday after reporting by US media and an acknowledgement from the White House that a small number of documents had been discovered in an office that Joe Biden used after he left the Obama administration in 2017. Republicans, though, are crying foul. Biden heavily criticized former President Donald Trump last year when several dozen boxes of government papers, including more than 100 classified documents, were found during an FBI raid of his Mar-a-Lago property in Florida.
Japan and the UK are stepping up their defensive alliance, signing a landmark security agreement in London on Wednesday. The meeting was part of the Japanese Prime Minister's week-long tour of G7 countries, which culminates in a sit-down with U.S. President Biden on Friday. FSN's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
Following meetings in Paris and Rome, Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida met with his UK counterpart Rishi Sunak. The deal signed by the two leaders will allow both countries to deploy their armed forces on each other's soil, as well as hold larger, more complex joint military exercises. They say it'll rapidly accelerate security and defense cooperation between the two countries, and it follows a similar deal Japan made with Australia, as Tokyo looks to expand its military partners around the world. The UK says it cements its commitment to Japan, while Japan's foreign ministry is calling it a breakthrough in creating a free and open Indo-Pacific, which will take the bilateral relationship to new heights.
It was a strong day of trading on Wall Street Wednesday as investors eagerly await the release of some key inflation data. FSN's William Denzelo reports from New York.
With no major economic data out Wednesday, traders had their attention fixed squarely on Thursday's big inflation gauge. Analysts expect December's consumer price index figures to tick down 0.1% compared to the month prior. At the close of trading Wednesday, the Dow was up 0.8%, the S&P 1.3%, and the Nasdaq ended up 1.8% to extend its hot streak into a fourth day.
And finally, influential British guitarist Jeff Beck has died at the age of 78. Beck initially rose to fame in the 1960s as a member of the group the Yardbirds. From Bureaus Worldwide, this is FSN.
We're still not sure why you'd want to watch, but our video feed is streaming nightly for free at cam.freetalklive.com.
It is Free Talk Live, 603-283-6160. There's still time if you want to get on the air with us at 603-283-6160. You're more than welcome to do that. You can weigh in, talk about the vaccines and libertarian blind spots. Drag shows is always a popular, divisive topic, and it is unnecessarily divisive. Bonnie's having a discussion, evidently, on Twitter with the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, which has chosen the silly, misguided path of alienating drag queens and just the LGBTQ population in general. I haven't seen any of this, so I'm just going off of what Bonnie has said, but I trust Bonnie's judgment on these things. And there is a strong conservative leaning among libertarians, and it's such a peculiar thing, right?
Well, they're conservatarians. They're not libertarians.
Well, hold on. So one of the things that I think is happening right now is just that we are at the peak of conservative libertarians. So 20 years ago, like, George W. Bush is in the White House, 9/11 has just happened, and okay, well, we're going to war with half the planet, and here's all of these things, and we get to feel up your balls if you want to travel to another state, and all of that. Okay, that was the, very bottom of conservative libertarianism. Like, in the conservative side of things, there was no powerful libertarianism, even though we had a strong voice in Ron Paul that converted a lot of people. But the conservatism itself was very authoritarian, and at that point,
still is.
Well,
and that's the reason this issue is even happening with the conservatarians in the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. They're characterizing drag shows as child abuse. And I don't know if they realize this or not, but this is the same issue I have with people characterizing transgenderism or transsexualism as being mentally ill. It's like these words have implications. The implications of child abuse is that someone has to intervene to put a stop to the abuse.
And like I said, I experienced these things as a child, and that wasn't the child abuse I went through. You know? That's not on the list.
Right. So, have you ever been to a burlesque show?
Yes.
Okay. So,
well, sort of.
Sort of?
I'm aware of that. I've never physically been to one, but I know people who have done them.
Okay.
And
she got a private
seen
show.
Those performances.
So,
but not in person.
Could you see where someone would say that was an abusive thing to bring a child to?
No.
You don't I'm not saying you agree with it. I'm saying, can you see why someone would believe that was so sexual that to bring a child there is to incline their mind in that direction and therefore abusive?
No.
I would say no. I watched rated R movies when I was a little kid. I watched horror movies when I was a little kid. That was not child abuse.
No.
And like we mentioned, on this show many times, there's a spectrum. All 5-year-olds aren't created equal. All 18-year-olds aren't created equal. All 14-year-olds aren't created equal. They are individuals. They're human beings that are all different, and their maturity level is going to be different.
I mean, in the Middle Ages, there weren't really bedrooms in the average person's house. There was just the common space, and you would literally lay there in the floor while your parents had sex right next to you. And
read Greek mythology, man.
Yeah, it would be child abuse to have sex with the child, certainly, and to make it a display for the child to have to watch or something like that.
I think it would be child abuse to have sex in front of a child. Now, you might not agree with me on that.
People for thousands of years did exactly that, and it didn't seem to bother people one way or the other.
Yes, people for thousands of years abused children.
I don't think that's child abuse.
Whether or not that's child abuse, people for thousands of years have abused children. That's a truth. That's a fact.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that what they were doing then constitutes child abuse. People for thousands of years did X. Doesn't mean that people for thousands of years did Y.
So you don't even see how it would be child abuse to sit your kid in front of some porn?
No.
No, not at all.
If my child wants to sit there and watch... Now, it would be wrong. I don't know if I would use the word abuse, but it would be wrong for me to be like, look, you're watching porn tonight, and that's all there is to it. Just like I wouldn't be like, look, you're watching Doctor Who tonight, and that's all there is to it. But if I have a 10-year-old child or a 5-year-old child, and they're like, I want to watch some porn, I'm not going to be like, no, you can't do that.
I think some education has to be done.
It would be very different for me to be like, now sit down on the couch and watch your pornography, right? Like that.
Eat your broccoli.
Well, now here's the thing. If you're a parent, that pretty much is the circumstance. Whatever you put on the plate is what they're eating. What you give them to do is what they have to do.
Yeah, but I don't
So
sit
if
around
what you're
watching
giving them to
pornography
do-
while I eat dinner, right?
Okay. I am very much on the side of let's not expose children to pornography. Let's, in fact, protect pre-sexual humans from, as much as possible, exposure to sexual activity because... and
You're the
here's-
one who spent the first hour arguing that humans are innately sexual.
There is
So
a
you're trying to protect
sexuality-
humans
there
from their
is-
own nature?
No, there's a time for it. And that time is called puberty.
I'm not saying there is or isn't a time for it. I am, however, saying that I would not sit my children down and let them watch and order them to watch pornography.
I want to say children start exploring themselves and each other sexually at a very young age, typically. Like that starts at like 2 years. I mean,
Yeah, and
usually
it can
like 2
screw
years
them up
old.
for life.
I don't
think playing doctor is going to screw kids up for life. Playing doctors with their uncle in the basement with movie time will.
That's the thing. If it's a creepy adult being malicious, that's one thing. But if it's like 2 5-year-olds that are like, hey, what's that? You know, show me mine and I'll show you yours sort of thing. Like that's what children do. And it doesn't, I mean, that's just like normal.
I don't think sex is immoral. I don't think sex is immoral. And I don't think it's damaging.
Some sex is immoral.
I don't think
some is, but
I
that's
think we
rape.
Right. Rape is still sex, and it's immoral.
I didn't say all rape. I didn't say that all sex. I said I don't think sex is immoral.
Some of it is.
I didn't say it wasn't. But sex in and of itself is not immoral.
Yeah, not all. Some, but not all. Yeah, definitely.
Right. But
Now,
we're not talking about rape here. It goes without saying that rape is wrong, and none of us are advocating rape or raping kids.
I think
so.
that
We can remove the conversation of rape entirely from the conversation that we're having.
I think sitting your kid in front of a porno is pretty close to rape, actually.
Did I say anything about putting my kid in front of a porno and saying, watch this? I explicitly said I would not do that.
Okay, so
However,
here's
if I
one of
was
the-
watching pornography for whatever reason, I wouldn't be like, oh God, no, kids, you can't watch pornography. I wouldn't. It's not a family event, obviously, but if my kid was watching pornography, I wouldn't be like, no, you're not allowed to watch that.
Why is it obvious that that's not a family event? If it's
Because the
obvious,
reason that
if
a
it's
person-
obvious that it's okay to bring
Why
the
do you
whole
watch
family
pornography?
Why do I watch pornography?
Yes.
That's none of your business.
All right.
And you're assuming my out of work activities. Thank you very much.
No, you could have
why do I
easily
watch
said I don't watch pornography.
To be titillated, to access that
Right,
that
and you don't-
that reptoid side
I
of my
understand.
brain.
And you don't do that with your children. And that's why I wouldn't watch pornography with my children.
Right. So one of the big
The
issues
same
that
reason
we're
I
dealing
wouldn't
with
have
here-
sex with them.
Okay.
Right?
So one of the issues that we're dealing with here is something called imprinting. So your early sexual experiences will have a permanent effect. It basically sets the foundation for your entire view of sexual reality from that point forward. So if you do it badly, you will have problems with your sexuality throughout your life.
It's possible.
It happens all the time.
I'm not saying it doesn't.
Early sexual experiences have a permanent effect that is extremely
Everything
difficult
has
to
a
reverse.
permanent effect on people.
No, it doesn't. Whether I picked my nose 5 minutes ago has no permanent effect on me.
Whether you were scolded for picking your nose when you were 5 years old absolutely does have a permanent effect on you.
And I think a lot of early childhood things do have permanent effects on us, whether we remember them or not. And I do agree that early sexual experiences like definitely will kind of, I mean, I don't say they definitely will, but I've seen in many circumstances where that will kind of reflect onto sexual experiences and thoughts and feelings in the future. But I just don't think.
I wholly agree that we should allow kids to be kids, right? We shouldn't be like, hey, look, you're 6 years old. It's time for you to learn about the birds and the bees or whatever. And you certainly shouldn't be having sex with children or exposing them to sex or anything like that. But when I say let kids mean kids, I mean exactly that. If your 5-year-old is playing doctor with the neighbor's 5-year-old, turn the other way.
Yeah.
Let the kids be kids.
And I think that there are some people that see that as doing harm to that child.
Why? I'm not doing anything to those children.
To not protect them from these experiences.
No, they don't need. I don't think they need to be protected. I think they need to be educated. And I think it's especially important for like when working with children to teach them the correct name for body parts. I hate all the little like silly,
I agree
pet names. It's weird because this isn't, like children
get those examples of kids telling their teachers, my uncle ate my cookie or whatever.
Touch my
exactly.
wee-wee.
So it's like children just need to be educated on their body parts, and when the time is right for that particular child about sex, reproduction, how their body works, like this is just part of raising children.
There's a really big difference between knowledge in the sense of like what you can talk to someone about or teach them, and experience.
Yeah. Again, we can remove the conversation of experiencing sex with children from the conversation entirely, because none of us are advocating
We're talking
that.
about 2 children, right?
Right.
So like 2 5-year-olds. So do you think that would scar them for life? Like if
potentially, I think that has the potential of having a permanent detrimental effect on their way of looking at
it also has
sexuality.
the potential of having positive effects on how they look at sexuality for the rest of their lives.
And the more developed their nervous system is when they have their first, because that's the thing, your first sexual experiences are extremely impactful.
No, you're jumping too far. It can have a negative experience on them for the rest of their life. I'm willing to admit that. It can also have a positive influence on them for the rest of their lives.
I'm willing to admit that.
So why interfere? Why not just leave it at that?
The more developed your nervous system is.
You don't know that.
I do know
You don't
that.
know how you can. You
Let me
don't
finish
know what
my
the chances
sentence and
are
I'll
of
tell you what I know.
You don't know what the chances are of a sexual experience being positive or negative for any of these people at any ages whatsoever. You're just speculating.
You're right. However, since you're going to have to throw the dice at some point, the more developed your nervous system is when you throw those dice, the more you're able to integrate the information. Like we were talking about integrating trauma. The more you can integrate trauma, the less it becomes dysfunctional. And the more you have a developed nervous system, the more capable of integrating a potentially negative sexual experience you're going to be.
It depends on to what extent they're rolling the dice. I don't think the 5-year-olds are going to have penetrative doctor,
doubtful.
right?
You don't think that, huh?
I sincerely don't. For one, I don't think the 5-year-old boy is capable of doing so, as my understanding of analogy works. But anatomy works.
You are mistaken.
Okay, whatever. I still don't think it's very likely that they're going to have penetrative sex. I think it's far more likely
like
that they're
something
going
to protect them from.
It's not my job to protect them from the. If 2 5-year-olds,
well, you don't have kids.
If 2
so
5-year-olds,
it's not your job to protect a kid from
it's
anything.
not your job to protect their kids either. It's the parents' job. And if 2 kids are playing doctor and that's what they do, I'm not going to be watching them anyway. If I see 2 kids and they start undressing each other to play doctor, I'm not gonna stand there watching it.
So you know what
I
think?
my kid, I'm going to blow the whistle on that.
I'm going to turn around and walk away.
As a parent, you can do that, right? And I think it's up for parents to decide that. But I think what is more detrimental to kids, and I don't even want to say if it's more or less. But what I know is detrimental to children is when we treat their bodies like they're like, oh, don't do that, don't touch yourself like that, Satan's gonna get you and God is watching. That whole thing makes people like you will carry that on for the rest of your life, and maybe you'll get rid of it, maybe you won't. But it's like, my body is inherently dirty.
Yeah.
I'm not allowed to touch myself. I'm not allowed to have sex. If I do, God is watching. I'm, all of these negative things. That is also detrimental to children, though.
So
and a
God
lot of
is
people do
watching
that.
And your body is evil are 2 different things.
But it's part of the same
we don't
Christian
even have to
rhetoric.
go that far, because I dated this girl once who had a kid, and she would yell at her kid anytime she caught him playing with his rear, fingers and stuff. I don't want to be graphic, but the kid would, and she would yell at him like, "No, you can't do that. That's gross." I was like, the only thing you need to tell this kid is to wash his hands when he's done.
Also, there might be a medical thing, so let's not yell at him if there might be.
It wasn't a medical thing.
Okay.
It was.
Okay.
It was very clearly a sexual thing.
Okay.
Right?
I am all for instructing them that this is not what you do in public.
Right,
that
but
is
it wasn't. It wasn't
know.
even that.
Yeah.
It was this kid was exploring his body, and she was damaging him. I mean, speaking of damaging kids, like, all she had to do was tell him not wash his hands, but she came at it from that Christian point of view. No. That she never said that's evil, that's sinful, that's the devil stuff, but she had that background. And she was like, no, you're not allowed to do that. That's bad. That's whatever. And it's like, that's damaging. But
I agree. I agree that
this 5-year-old or whatever his age was exploring himself in that way is not damaging him at all.
Well, I agree that the background of your body is inherently evil is a very serious problem. And yeah, you don't even have to say it because it's the foundation of what you do say, or in many cases, scream. And that is definitely damaging. I agree completely on that. And I think that there is a middle ground in between these where you are neither yelling at the kid about how sinful and evil and dirty their body is, as if yelling was a real, effective way to help kids anyway. Right. And at the same time, you're not exposing them to a potentially damaging experience.
Let's not use the word exposing here, because I'm not saying that one should expose
to protect them from a potentially damaging
Those are two
experience.
very different things. It's a very different thing for me to expose a kid to pornography and to not protect them from pornography. Exposing them to pornography is like exposing. That's presenting it to them in some manner.
Yeah.
Failing to prevent it is just not forbidding them from seeing it. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. These are two fundamentally different things. Exposing someone to something is very different from not preventing them from seeing it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But still, I think there's a middle ground where you are still protecting them, but you're not doing the damage yourself.
And I think we can all agree on that, though, right?
And
I'm just not sure it's necessary to protect them.
And I get that there's going to be differences of opinion of okay, well, I think that you playing doctor with Susie will be a helpful experience to you. And okay, well, that's your parenting style. And since you are the trustee of this child, now people think they own their kids, and that's horrible.
It is.
But no, kids own themselves. You are being trusted with them. Now, I can see that there are some people that would think that's a helpful experience, and that's a reasonable perspective that I completely disagree with.
The whole reason that we got into this, though, is, and I want to bring it back real quickly, is to the Libertarian Party and the Conservatarians here in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And in the Conservative Libertarian Party, I don't really care what they think about drag queens or drag shows or whether or not they're sexualized. I really don't care. My perspective on this is much simpler. You guys need to shut up. The last thing the libertarians in general, the Libertarian Party, Free Staters, they have a huge problem with it being 99.9% just straight cis white dudes.
They seem to like that.
Yes.
Because it seems like they're trying to attract other conservative-minded people.
Yes.
Who are typically white men.
And I hate to inform them of this, but if they want the ideology to grow and to be successful, they need diversity. So I don't care, Libertarian Party of New Hampshire.
I think that's just a function of time, really.
Not if they're out there. Not if they're out there
now,
doing everything they can to alienate LGBTQ people.
Okay, 20 years from now,
it's not a function of time because
the Democratic. 20 years from now, the Democrats will be the libertarians and the Republicans will be the authoritarians, because that's how it always goes. And at that point, we will have no problem with having too many straight white cis men.
No, I disagree entirely, because I can't get any of my LGBTQ friends to even tolerate the ideology of the Libertarian Party.
They're on Team Democrat.
No, it's because the Libertarian Party is on freaking Twitter posting about how evil drag shows are.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing everything they can to alienate LGBTQ people. And the straight cis white dudes in the Libertarian Party don't understand why this is a problem.
And they have said other problematic things on Twitter, and that's why I don't like political parties, and I don't care if it's Libertarian, Republican, or Democrat.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the issues with the whole drag show thing is that where does it end? Because, okay, the left had a huge victory in legalizing gay marriage. Now, did they stop there? No, they pressed it further. They've pressed it
as they should.
No, at some point you've made the change you need to make. You don't need to reach the point where 5-year-olds are getting their tits cut off. That's not where you need to go with this.
5-year-olds don't have breasts, first of all, and almost no one is giving sexual reassignment surgery to anyone who's gone through puberty. In fact, the medical consensus is that you can't do it to people who haven't gone through puberty, and you want them to go through puberty. Otherwise, there's literally not enough material there to work with to do the sexual reassignment surgery. So the medical advice is certainly to wait until people are 18. So that's just Fox News talking points that have been blown out of proportion.
That's medical advice right now. But that's the thing. The entire medical establishment is very clearly motivated by politics. So politics are going to change.
The medical industry
if the vaccine didn't prove this to you, I don't know what will.
Okay, that's different from the transgenderism thing.
It really isn't.
Okay, well, I disagree.
It is still the medical establishment jumping when the political machine says to jump. So right now, sure, they're being reasonable in saying, don't do this until you have finished your puberty.
Well,
but that's not likely to stay where it is.
But of course the medical establishment is going to jump when bureaucrats say to jump, because they're governed by the CDC. You know, they're licensed with the state. It's one and the same.
Right.
They're just other bureaucrats.
That's exactly it. So as it becomes politically expedient to do this or to do that, they're still not going to protect us. They're not.
I don't look to them to protect anyone, though.
Well, then why are you talking about how they are currently advising that you wait until 18 for transition?
Because you're the one who brought it up. You're the one who said, they shouldn't be out there cutting breasts off of 5-year-olds. You literally brought it up, and I pointed out to you rightly that they're literally not.
Right, and my point
so
is
you can't ask me why I brought it up when I brought it up to dispute what you said, and then you continued arguing with me instead of acknowledging that I proved what you said wrong.
We are headed in that direction, and there is nothing apparent to stop us from getting to that point.
What direction are we heading toward when I told you that the medical
sex transition?
The medical establishment literally says not to do that.
Today.
And you're okay, well, they could say anything tomorrow. You're certainly correct. But all of the medical establishment is saying that you can't do this to people who haven't gone through puberty, and advised to do this to people who haven't gone through puberty. And at this point, you're tilting at windmills.
You know what? This just goes back to parenting, and we need to be educating our children. We need to be not traumatizing them, not abusing them. We need to be helping them develop themselves emotionally and psychologically and rationally so they can be able to make these decisions for themselves. Because I think with what you're worried about with the transition of children, it is a root cause of public schooling and bad parenting. Mm-hmm. Because what's happening, and what I've seen some of, is when kids go to public school, they do what's popular, they do what's cool. I've seen a lot of kids become non-binary, trans, or even, whatever, because that's what their friends are doing, and they might not actually be that way. Some of them definitely, genuinely are. But I think we need to be able to raise our children to know the difference and to be able to explore their own personality, their own sexuality, and their own identity without being so easily not manipulated, but, affected by what others are doing. And I think it's almost impossible to do that when your kids are in public school and when you're not raising them, when the teachers are raising them, when they're being more affected by their classmates than they are their own family.
And I do think that's a part of what freaks these parents out so much is they don't trust themselves to go against the grain enough to say, no, drag shows are not for my kids. They're like, well, eventually it'll be so normalized that I will feel social pressure and I am weak, so I will fall for it.
Those people shouldn't have kids then. And if drag shows make you uncomfortable and you don't want your kids to see them, then don't, I don't think.
Well, that's most people. Most people don't have the strength to go against the grain for what they believe.
Well,
in which case, I got to agree with Nikki on this one. They just shouldn't. If you're not willing to stand up for what you believe,
well, there goes the species.
Yeah, you shouldn't raise kids.
Well, there it goes.
Well,
if only.
The government will be happy to raise them for you.
Well, they shouldn't have them in the first place, I would argue. We're out of time for the night, though. You can continue arguing with us in the meantime over on our chat server at chat.freetalklive.com. You can hang out with us there. Again, that's chat.freetalklive.com.
On Free Talk Live, we're bringing people to the ideas of liberty every day. From wrestling superstars like Glenn Jacobs.
You guys really are having an impact, I believe. Like I said, a lot of where I am now is due to listening to Free Talk Live. You changed my mind on some very important issues years ago.
To random people tuning in on the radio.
I was kind of
stuck in the left-right paradigm. I heard your show by chance on a Saturday night. From there, I went on, joined the Free State Project, and become an amplifier. So, I mean, that's really the reason why I amp is because I know that if it wasn't for you guys being on as many stations as you are, I never would have found the ideas of liberty.
You can help more people hear the message of liberty by joining Free Talk Live's AMPS program on Patreon for as little as $5 a month. And you'll get access to special perks. Visit amps.freetalklive.com, amps.freetalk